Yun-Chi's consciousness returns in a place between life and death, his profound power shattered. The Phoenix spirit offers a choice, but the cost is a future he cannot yet see. Leave a like, subscribe, and walk this fragile path with him. God realms swiftly rushed back into his head as things grew more and more clear. Jasmine, Xianxia, the very last moments of his life solidified in this instant, and after that everything had faded to black. After a person had died, they still retained their consciousness after all. But where exactly is this place? And where is Jasmine? Would she be by my side? In this afterlife, will I still see those who were once my friends or enemies? Yet the aching pain and heaviness that his body felt was so clear. These sensations were so clear that it felt as if he were still alive. Finally, after the light once more pierced into his vision, those eyes of his, which had remained closed for a very long time, slowly opened with much difficulty. The wooden ceiling that greeted him was short and old-fashioned, but it was not stained by a single mote of dust. He turned his head as he struggled to see what was around him. It was a very small wooden hut that was simple and tidy, but for some odd reason, it filled him with a sense of familiarity that was not too distant. The footsteps of the young girl who had left not too long ago once again hurriedly drew near at this moment. Very quickly, the figure of a girl appeared in the wooden door that had been opened. This girl looked to be about 20 years of age. She wore red clothes and her features were lovely. The phoenix mark between her brows faintly shone, lending her an aura of sacredness. She arrived at the foot of the bed, and upon seeing Yun-Chi's opened eyes, her eyes misted over in excited elation. "Big brother benefactor, you've finally woken up. This is simply too great. Woo-woo, it's simply too great." The young girl's voice was filled with emotion, and tears actually stained her cheeks after that. Yun-Chi stared at her dazedly, and gradually the image of a lovely and tender girl appeared in his mind, merging together with the girl standing in front of him. After that, a name spilled out from his lips, Xian'er. The young girl was stunned by what he said. She was overjoyed that he still remembered her, and she nodded her head with extreme vigor. "Yes, that's me. I am Xian'er, sniff, sniff, sniff." Bang. The wooden door was once more pushed open with much force. Several human figures hurriedly strode through it as they quickly arrived at the foot of the bed he was lying on. Upon seeing that he had awoken, looks of extreme emotion and excitement appeared on every single one of their faces. Yun-Chi, the middle-aged man who stood at the head of everyone, called his name. "You've finally awoken. Huo, it's great that nothing went wrong, it's great that nothing went wrong." "Senior, Feng," Yun-Chi said in a rough and harsh-sounding voice. The girl had already grown up, and her appearance had changed greatly from the time he had met her all those years ago. But the middle-aged man in front of him did not look the slightest bit different, so his brain immediately recalled his name. Feng Beichuan, the clan leader of the Phoenix clan that resided in the heart of the 10,000 Beast mountain range. "Big brother benefactor, you've finally woken up." A tall and straight-backed young man with a martial bearing who was standing beside Feng Beichuan spoke up excitedly, his eyes also faintly glimmering with tears. "Zu-er," Yun-Chi's once again whispered in a soft and dazed voice, his mind completely lost in a haze. His mind had gone back to 13 years ago. He had been 16 that year, and that was also the first year he had met Jasmine, when they still had a mutual disdain and dislike for each other. During that year, he and Kang Yue, who had changed her name to Lan Zuruo at that time, were being pursued by Xiao sect's branch sect, and they tumbled into the heart of the 10,000 Beast mountain range from high above. They had a chance encounter with the Phoenix clan that had been forced to hide in this land after their bloodline had been cursed. They saved Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er, and after that, he had passed the trial of the Phoenix and proceeded to obtain the Phoenix blood legacy along with the 5th and 6th stages of the world ode of the Phoenix. After that, he used the Phoenix divine powers that he had obtained to rescue the Phoenix clan that had fallen into a crisis, and he even dispelled the curse that afflicted their bloodline as well. Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er had only been 8 years old at that time. 5 years ago, before he left for the God realm, he previously wanted to bring Feng Xian'er to visit the Phoenix clan, but they had discovered that the Phoenix clan had been enclosed within a powerful protective barrier. He then secretly rescued the siblings Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er when they had met with danger after leaving the barrier. He had also left them the world ode of the Phoenix with all 6 stages and a case of Overlord pellets. After that, he had chosen not to disturb them and quietly left together with Feng Xian'er. But to think that he actually saw them once again in the afterlife. Had they also died, or was he? He slowly raised his arm, but after he had raised it halfway, he found that he had no more strength after that. As it fell against his side, Yun Qi could clearly feel the sensation of his arm touching his own body. He looked at the Feng Beichuan, who looked exactly as refined and mild as he did in his memories, and the two siblings, Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er, before he spoke as if he was mumbling in his sleep. Could it be that I am still alive? Hey, Feng Beichuan gave a small chuckle. He had not found Yun Qi's reaction the least bit strange. Of course you're still alive, because someone who has died won't be able to ask such a question. Yun Qi's mouth dropped open slightly, and his originally clear awareness sank into an even deeper haze at this moment. Everything that had happened in the star-god realm once again reverberated in his mind. He had forcefully used other Shor Usura with the resolve to die, and a countless amount of fresh blood had violently sprayed in the air as people died one after the other. But in the end, his life ran out and his spirit burned, until it was completely burned to ashes. With the last thread of consciousness he possessed, he could sense his body being torn apart before becoming fragments which filled the sky. So how could he still be alive? Furthermore, this place, where exactly was it? Where is this place? The thoughts in his mind had unconsciously spilled from his lips. This place is our home. Feng Xian'er wiped away her tears before speaking in a soft but happy voice. It is the place where we met Big Brother Benefactor and Sister Zuruo all those years ago. It was Lord Phoenix God who sent you here. You've already been unconscious for so many days, but you've finally woken up. Yun Qi's eyes were still stunned and hazy. This place is where the Phoenix clan is. I returned to the profound sky continent. The Phoenix God sent me here. What's going on? What exactly is going on here? Could it be that I truly did not die? But if I didn't die, could it be that everything that had happened in the star god realm, everything that had happened in the god realm was merely a dream? Upon seeing Yun Qi's expression be filled with a bewilderment that bordered on delusion, Feng Beichuan spoke up. Yun Qi, your heart must definitely be filled with countless questions and suspicions. However, at this moment, you have just woken up and your body is still very weak. Do not dwell too much on things for now. First, take some time to rest and recuperate, and once you have sufficiently recovered, you will be able to see Lord Phoenix God. Lord Phoenix God will definitely be able to dispel all of your doubts. Yun Qi did not react to those words. Zar, quickly go and inform your mother and the rest of the clansmen that Yun Qi has woken up to ease their worries. Xian'er, stay behind and take care of Yun Qi. Yes, Feng Xian'er hurriedly replied before he rushed off to tell everyone else. Feng Xian'er stayed behind, gracefully standing beside the bed as she quietly looked at Yun Qi, who was still lost in his thoughts. As she stood there, her hands unconsciously grasped the corner of her clothes. Some nervousness mixed in with her happiness. Yun Qi did not speak for a very long time. During this long period of time, he finally managed to regain some composure, and he slowly closed his eyes after that. The Phoenix clan elder was right. Even though he did not know why he was still alive, the current him found it difficult to lift even an arm, so at the very least, he needed to allow his body to recover to the point where he could move about normally. He closed his eyes and quieted his heart before he silently started to circulate the great way of the Buddha. As his thoughts moved and circulated, the profound formula started to circulate as well. But in the next instant, he opened his eyes yet again. As the great way of the Buddha circulated, the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth actually did not respond at all. He hurriedly focused his heart yet again as he started to circulate it once more. One breath passed after the other, until Yun Qi's emotions started to become frazzled. But the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that was everywhere still did not respond in the slightest, and not a single thread of it surged towards his body. What was going on? The great way of the Buddha was the rage God's divine art which did not rely on profound energy. When the great way of the Buddha advanced in stages, one's body would become more and more intimate with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Even if one did not circulate it deliberately, their body would be absorbing and harmonizing with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth at every instant. The level of spirit energy that could be absorbed by a person was dependent on the stage of the great way of the Buddha that person had attained. The higher the stage, the higher the level of spirit energy that could be absorbed. Normally, even if Yun Qi had completely exhausted his profound energy and was so heavily wounded that he was on the verge of death, as long as a single breath remained in his body, it would start to automatically recover due to the great way of the Buddha. Furthermore, once he regained consciousness and started to deliberately circulate it, He would recover at such a fast pace that ordinary people would not be able to fathom it. But at this moment, even though he kept circulating the great way of the Buddha again and again, the only thing he received was a deathly stillness. Could it be that my wounds are too severe, he softly muttered in his heart. But in the past, no matter how severe his wounds had been, this sort of thing had never happened before. The divine art was still ringing in his ears, but it was as if his body had completely lost all connection to and intimacy with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. When this thought flashed through his mind, he had immediately smothered firmly. He tried to manipulate some profound energy, but he could not even sense the existence of his profound veins. Am I truly too badly wounded? As these thoughts floated in his mind, he closed his eyes once again and attempted to inspect the state of his body. But his concentration only continued for a few instants before his eyes sprang open yet again, his gaze cloudy and turbid. Being able to internally inspect one's own body was the most basic spiritual sensing ability of a profound practitioner. Even someone who had just entered the profound way and was in the elementary profound realm could do it. Even when he had been the Xiao Qi, whose profound veins had been crippled, who could only remain in the first stage of the elementary profound realm, he was still able to do it. But when he had tried to inspect his body internally just now, he realized that his spiritual senses were actually unable to penetrate his own body. Actually, it would be more accurate to say that he basically no longer had the spiritual senses that belonged to the profound way. No, it shouldn't be like this. Even if I am so wounded that I only have a thread of energy and life left, it still shouldn't be this way. There's definitely a problem somewhere. Could it be that I have overtaxed my profound strength too greatly? That's right. There was some sacred spiritual nectar that Xianxia had given him inside the sky poison pearl. That should allow me to instantly recover. He used much effort to raise his left hand, but he immediately discovered that his own thoughts were actually unable to enter the sky poison pearl. In fact, he was completely unable to sense the existence of the sky poison pearl. Yun Qi's eyes shook as his heart was thrown into complete and utter chaos. After that, he started to yell panikedly, "Hunger, hunger!" Ah! His sudden shouts gave Feng Xian'er a great fright, and she hurriedly moved forward. "Big brother benefactor, what are you saying?" It was as if Yun Qi had not heard her voice. His body was struggling, but he basically could not even sit up straight. His voice was becoming more and more panicked and flustered. "He Ling, Hunger, He Ling." No matter how much he called those names, he did not get a single response. "Big brother benefactor, what's wrong with you? Don't frighten me." Yun Qi's extremely bizarre reaction had left Feng Xian'er both panicked and flustered. She did not know what to do, but it was good that Yun Qi suddenly calmed down at this precise moment. He no longer shouted or struggled. Instead, he dazedly stared at the ceiling and went completely still for a very long time. "Big brother benefactor, you need to take a good rest. Don't think about anything right now. You will get better, you'll definitely will," Feng Xian'er softly consoled him. "Xian'er," Yun Qi said gloomily, "can you help me with just one thing?" "Ah, bring me to see the Phoenix God," Yun Qi said slowly. He could hear just how weak and hoarse his voice sounded. "Right now." "You can't," Feng Xian'er shook her head. "You're still far too weak, you can't move around willy-nilly. Bring me there, I need to see it right now." His gaze shifted to the side as he looked at the flustered Phoenix girl with lifeless eyes. "Xian'er, please help me, okay?" Whether it was his gaze or his words, both caused Feng Xian'er to become completely powerless to reject him. Qi's waist as she floated into the air while carrying him. They avoided all the eyes of her clansmen as they flew toward the Phoenix's trial grounds. Yun Qi's weight was nearly completely pressed against Feng Xian'er. A mountain wind blew over. It was not very strong, yet it caused Yun Qi to feel a stifling sensation that was difficult to endure. Feng Xian'er immediately sensed it, and she hurriedly slowed down her already very slow flying speed. "To think that I would actually grow this weak," Yun Qi muttered bitterly in his heart. However, this was definitely only temporary. The Phoenix clan only had around 200 people, and their two strongest cultivators were Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er. So no one noticed when she quietly brought Yun Qi to the place where the Phoenix god resided. Feng Xian'er descended from the top of a very high mountain wall with Yun Qi, and in front of them stood the ceiling formation in Yun Qi's memory. "Big brother benefactor, we're here." Feng Xian'er extended a finger and touched the ceiling formation. A small point of scarlet flame flashed by, and the ceiling formation immediately vanished. A scarlet-black space that seemed endless then appeared in front of them. Feng Xian'er supported Yun Qi as she brought him forward. Once they had taken a single step inside, the world around them immediately changed, and all light vanished as their world plunged into darkness. Feng Xian'er knelt down and spoke in a pious and devout voice. Phoenix descendant Feng Xian'er begs for an audience with Lord Phoenix God. Just as her voice fell, two long and narrow scarlet lights suddenly appeared in this pitch-black world. Following that, those two long and narrow scarlet lights slowly began to open, forming into a pair of phoenix eyes which seemed set into this world. When Xianxia had come to this place all those years ago, the pair of phoenix eyes he had seen were a dazzling and sacred golden color. But at this moment, those eyes were scarlet, and an obvious dimness had appeared in them. "Xianxia, it's been a long time since we last met." The voice that came from the phoenix spirit was still as intimidating and imposing as it was before, yet distinctively different from the voice in Xianxia's memories. It clearly seemed to have grown weaker and older. But this was not what Xianxia was concerned with. He stared straight at those scarlet phoenix eyes. "Ah, yes, it has been a very long time." "Xian'er, withdraw from this place first." "Yes," Feng Xian'er replied. She released a thread of warm, profound energy and focused it into a cluster of flowing energy that did not dissipate for a very long time. She softly wrapped it around Xianxia's body before she left, worry and anxiety plaguing her mind. "Xianxia." After Feng Xian'er left, the tone with which the phoenix spirit spoke with had also noticeably changed. Before the phoenix spirit in the flame god realm's god-burying inferno prison dissipated, it sent all of its soul memories to this noble one. Contained within was a lot of news related to you. "I found out that you had obtained a phoenix inheritance even further advanced than the one you had previously received, and that you had cultivated the complete world ode of the phoenix." This noble one was extremely gratified by that news. But who would have thought that barely more than a year later, your fate would actually change in such a tragic way? The phoenix spirit said with a sigh. "Perhaps this is the jealousy of the heavens." As soul fragments left behind by the phoenix, the divine spirits could transmit their memories to each other. This was something Xianxia had long been aware of, so he was not the least bit surprised to hear this. He regulated his unbearably weak aura before asking, "Phoenix Spirit, the Phoenix Clan Elder and the rest told me that it was you who sent me to this place. What happened? Why did I not die? And I even appeared in this place. I was clearly..." Within his own memories, his body had died and his soul had been destroyed. He had well and truly been dead. "No," the Phoenix Spirit replied in a gentle voice. "Your memories and cognition of what had transpired are correct. You had already died, even though this noble one is unaware of how you died." Xianxia was stunned by those words. "The current you is the you who has been resurrected from death." "Resurrected from death?" The words uttered by the Phoenix Spirit caused Xianxia to be even more confused. Without a shadow of a doubt, if anyone had heard those words, they would have been struck dumb as well. If one died, one died. The so-called notion of resurrection from death had always been something that had belonged solely in dreams and fantasy. It was a divine miracle that was impossible to realize. Even if they had been the gods and devils who had been destroyed during the era of gods, none of them had the ability to resurrect. So if they had not been able to, how could the mortal creatures of the present era accomplish such a feat? But if there was truly something like resurrection from death in this world, then perhaps it had only ever happened to Xianxia. Could it be the mirror of samsara yet again? He muttered in a dazed voice. When he had still been in floating clouds' Xiao family, he had been poisoned to death by Xiao Yulong on the day he was supposed to marry Xia Qingyu. But he had been reborn in the Azure Cloud continent because of the mirror of samsara. After that, he had committed suicide in the Azure Cloud continent by jumping off Cloud's End cliff. But once again, he had been returned to this current life by the power of the mirror of samsara. No, the Phoenix Spirit shut down his assumption. Even though this noble one does not know why the mirror of samsara would activate its power of reincarnation on you, every time the mirror of samsara's powers activate, it will hibernate for the next 20 years. The mirror of samsara would enter into hibernation for 20 years every time its power activated. Jasmine had also clearly told him such a thing before. The Phoenix Spirit had read Xianxia's memories before, so it naturally knew about the existence of the mirror of samsara in his possession. However, it has only been 13 years since the last time it allowed you to pass through the cycle of reincarnation. Furthermore, the power of the mirror of samsara allows one to pass through samsara. It is not the power of resurrection. Then how did it happen? Xianxia was even more mystified now. Do you still remember what had happened after you finished inheriting the Phoenix divine power all those years ago? Do you remember that before this noble one sent you out of this place, I told you that I had given you a unique gift? I remember. Xianxia nodded his head. He could indeed recall this with extreme clarity because it had been steeped in a thick aura of mystery. Thus, even though Xianxia had never found out what this unique gift was, he had never once forgotten about it. Your time in this trial ground is reaching its end, and it's time for me to send you out. However, before I do so, I should perhaps give you a special present. After the phoenix spirit's voice had fallen all those years ago, a beam of golden firelight had shot out from the phoenix god's pupils before alighting on his forehead. He clearly remembered that the scarlet phoenix imprint on his forehead turned a dazzling gold after the beam of light had touched him. It had looked like a cluster of burning golden flames. This is a special power that I can only use once in my lifetime, but I never thought the day where I used it would actually come. However, as the one who carries the power of the evil god, your future is destined to be extraordinary, and bestowing this power upon you is more than suitable. As to what kind of power this is, when the time of you using it comes, you will naturally know. However, not only did the phoenix spirit not make clear what this unique and mysterious gift was, Jasmine, who also clearly knew what it was, had never been willing to tell him the answer. Furthermore, upon obtaining the dragon god's legacy, the primordial azure dragon had also mentioned it. In the illusory demon realm's Golden Crow Lightning Flame Valley, the Golden Crow spirit had also emphasized this point, and due to its competitive nature, it had also given him a great gift as well. The phoenix spirit, Jasmine, the primordial azure dragon, the Golden Crow spirit. All of them had known what this present was, but in an act of incomparable unity, none of them had been willing to tell him. Instead, everyone said something along the same lines: if you ever have occasion to use it, you will naturally find out what it is. However, Jasmine had once said something which had held a very deep implication. You had better pray that you never ever have to use it. Fo nix, nerve Anna. Within the dark space, the phoenix spirit's scarlet eyes faintly flickered as it bestowed the answer upon Xianxia. Those two words caused Xianxia's eyes to fiercely jerk upwards as those words escaped his mouth. Phoenix Nirvana. These were two words that Xianxia was completely familiar with. Or perhaps it would be better to say that they were two words that everyone under heaven would be familiar with. No matter whether it was the lower realms or the god realm, every place had their own distant myths and legends about the ancient gods or divine beasts. Some of these stories were based on reality, but others were complete fabrications, and the vast majority of these stories belonged to the latter. After all, the age of the true gods had ended long ago, and real records that had been left behind were exceedingly rare. This was especially true in the lower realms, as these sort of stories and legends were basically fabrications. However, one legend concerning the phoenix mentioned that it could be reborn in fire after it had died, and this kind of divine miracle was known as the Phoenix Nirvana. This was a legend that Xianxia had already heard when he was a kid in this life. After that, on the day that Jasmine left, he had fallen victim to heavenly poison star god Moonflower's secret attack, and he was bound to die due to the power of the heavenly poison. However, he had miraculously survived, and what had saved him had been Feng Xian'er's flames of nirvana. It was also at that time that he, someone who had possessed the phoenix divine powers for many years, discovered that there was a flame known as the flames of nirvana among the phoenix divine flames. Furthermore, it was a flame that could only be ignited once in a person's life. However, at that time, his understanding of the flames of nirvana was that it was merely a flame that possessed extremely strong cleansing powers. Feng Xian'er's profound strength had not reached the divine way at that time, yet she was able to use these flames of nirvana, that she could only ignite once in her life to cleanse his body of the heavenly poison's divine power. One could very well imagine just how strong its power of cleansing was from that, but he had never imagined. Could it be that the legend of the Phoenix Nirvana rebirth was actually true? Xianxia's expression was filled with disbelief. This whole thing felt extremely unreal, so unreal that it felt as if he had been dropped into some legendary realm of myth and illusion. But he was still alive. He was still alive despite being torn apart and crushed, so this was the best testament to the fact that all of this was real. In the ancient era, the evil god had done a great favor for the Phoenix clan before. Moreover, your body had inherited and contained the only evil god legacy in this universe. The you at that time was still far too weak, so this noble one was afraid that you would die, thus severing the legacy of the evil god's power forever. This noble one could only bestow a cluster of nirvanic divine flames upon you. This would allow you to be reborn in fire after you had met with calamity. Xianxia. The reason why I did not tell you was because I was worried that once you had discovered this, you would subconsciously lose a degree of fear and reverence towards death. The phoenix spirit sighed. Once I had been informed of your accomplishments in the God realm, this noble one prayed that there would never be a moment where you had to ignite these flames of nirvana. Yet I never imagined that this day would still come in the end, and it came so quickly at that. The root of your nirvanic divine flames originated from this place, so when you ignited the flames of nirvana, you were reborn here. Xianxia remained silent for a very long time. He needed an adequate amount of time to process and accept this incomparably fantastical sequence of events. The flames of nirvana that would allow a phoenix to be reborn in flames, a legendary myth that he had previously thought was mere fabrication, had actually been true. 13 years ago, when the 16-year-old him had obtained the phoenix divine power in this place, he had actually also obtained the most precious flames of nirvana from the phoenix spirit, because he borne the evil god's powers. This also meant that from that time onward, he already had a second life. When his body had been torn apart and smashed to bits in the star god realm, he had indeed died at that time. But the instant he died, it ignited the flames of nirvana in his body, a power that he had not known existed in his body, and after that he was reborn in this place. Furthermore, what had saved him from Moonflower's heavenly poison divine power had not only been Feng Xian'er's flames of nirvana, it had also been her second life. It's just that. The phoenix spirit's voice sank at this moment. Even though the truth would be incomparably cruel to Xianxia, it was something it had to make clear in the end, and it was also a reality that Xianxia would have to accept. This noble one is merely a soul fragment left behind by the phoenix, and not the true phoenix itself. The flames of nirvana this noble one bestowed upon you cannot even begin to be compared with the flames of nirvana produced by the phoenix true god. In fact, it is not even worthy of being called the flames of nirvana. The true flames of nirvana will not only cause the phoenix to be reborn in fire, but also cause its divine power to be even greater than before. However, the flames of nirvana that ignited after you died indeed caused your resurrection, but the only thing it resurrected was your life. Xianxia struggled with all his might, but his head lifted with an incomparable slowness. What do you mean? You should have sensed this already. The phoenix spirit spoke in an incomparably frank and honest voice. Your current body is no longer the divine body that has been refined and tempered by divine blood and divine power. It is merely the body of a mortal, a body that could not be any weaker. You are also unable to use any profound energy. Your spiritual senses and your soul have all returned to that of an ordinary man's. You could even say that you have been weakened into an ordinary man. Even though it was facing Xianxia's gradually contracting pupils, the phoenix spirit's cruel words did not halt. In other words, the only thing that has been reborn under the flames of nirvana is your life. As for your divine power, divine body, divine soul, and divine senses, all of those are already dead. Dead inside the phoenix's pupils were the only light source inside the dark space, but its scarlet, fiery glow looked like shadows to Xianxia right now. The world fell completely silent. He looked like a soulless husk as he stared blankly towards the front with deadened eyes. The phoenix spirit stopped talking. It was well aware that being crippled was a fate worse than death to a profound practitioner, especially when the one before it was a man who had once stood at the top of the continent, enjoyed unparalleled glory, and achieved many great things that might as well be miracles again and again. However, he had become a cripple after what felt like a journey in one's dreams. It was impossible to accept a nightmare like this without warning. Even a profound practitioner from the god realm, a divine sovereign, or even a divine master would have seen their willpower falter, especially considering that this was a nightmare that he would never wake up from. Is there a way to recover from this? His voice was incredibly weak and slow. There's no such thing as an easy resurrection, the phoenix spirit answered him. Right now you're just a mortal, a weak mortal who needs time to recover. Everything you had before is now in the past. Can I start over my cultivation after I recover? Xianxia asked again. You cannot. No matter how cruel the truth was, the phoenix spirit wouldn't hide it from Xianxia. The evil god's profound veins are still inside you, but they have passed away from this world. There is no power in the entire world that can awaken the evil god profound veins, unless you can find another drop of evil god blood. Xianxia stared blankly and emptily towards the front. The ice phoenix girl at the bottom of the heavenly netherfrost lake had once told him that the evil god had ended his own life prematurely in order to leave behind a single drop of indestructible blood. This also meant that the evil god's indestructible blood Jasmine found at the southern divine region was well and truly the one, and only inheritance the evil god had left behind for the world. Naturally, there was no such thing as another drop of evil god blood. What this meant was that his power wasn't the only thing he had lost. He had even lost his ability to cultivate. He would be a cripple for eternity. He, Xianxia let out an unbelievably withered laugh. What kind of a joke is this? This is the price of my resurrection. This is your so-called nirvana, Phoenix Spirit. This is your so-called nirvana, Xianxia had said. His words were without a doubt an affront to the Phoenix Spirit's dignity, but it wasn't angry at all. It was because he knew how shocking and cruel this realization was for Xianxia. Why didn't you just let me die? Xianxia growled in a raspy voice. At least I'd be able to accompany her in death. I promised her to meet her in the next world. Why didn't you let me die? Why? These few lines alone had exhausted his breath and made him feel dizzy. The bitter smile on his face grew even bleaker and more terrible than before, crippled. This was clearly worse than even a sick old man. He hadn't thought that he would be able to save Jasmine the day he broke into Star God realm, but he had thought that he would at least be able to die with her. Although he had killed many Star Guards and a Star God Elder, it was of no detriment to the ceremony at all. Moreover, the ceremony must have been completed already considering that he was out for so many days. Jasmine and Xianxia were the sacrifices for the ceremony, so they were undoubtedly dead by now. But he had promised to accompany Jasmine to their next lives, yet he was still alive. Alive as a cripple for eternity. He slowly made a pair of fists through his shaking. He tried to lift his hands, only to run out of energy before he could even raise them past his waist. He couldn't even commit suicide even if he wanted to. I understand your feelings, the Phoenix Spirit said, but life is the most precious thing the heavens have granted to every living being. No matter how petty and low one's life has become, it is still something that should be respected and appreciated. Besides, is there really nothing more important to you than death right now? For a long time, Xianxia wasn't able to say anything. As more and more images and faces flashed through his mind, his dim pupils started shaking harder and harder. He was on the profound sky continent. He had finally come home. He could finally meet those people that he had missed day and night and tell them that he had returned, but at the same time he was afraid. How am I going to face them like this? A very long silence later. Thank you for granting me a second life, Xianxia said slowly. He sounded a little calmer than before, but his hands were still gripped tightly into fists. I know you cannot accept things as they are immediately, the Phoenix Spirit said. That's not a problem. There's no need to force yourself to accept it immediately. As time passes, you will eventually find another reason to live, and maybe one day you may even come to realize that returning to normal isn't a bad thing. Right now, this was the only way it could console Xianxia. Xianxia's current state was something that could destroy the will of any profound practitioner. However, the Phoenix Spirit was the giver of Xianxia's current life, which is why it didn't wish to see Xianxia squander it in an eternal abyss of despair. Xianxia didn't answer it. Go. The Phoenix Spirit narrowed its scarlet eyes slightly. Your second life isn't just a gift, but a trial. If you can overcome this with your own willpower, you may not just be reborn in the body, but also the soul. Xianxia, the Phoenix Spirit closed its eyes, and the world returned to darkness one more time before it turned bright. The world around Xianxia had changed soundlessly, and he had been returned to the entrance of the Phoenix's trial grounds once more. The barrier behind Xianxia resealed itself, and in front of him he saw Feng Xian'er, Feng Xian'er, Feng Beichuan, and many other Phoenix clansmen. Everyone's face was etched with deep worry and anxiety. Their expressions immediately turned into care when they saw Xianxia. Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er were the first ones to make it to him and support him from both sides. A warm feeling rose from within Xianxia's darkened heart. He could see that their care had come from the bottom of their hearts, and they hadn't looked down on him or put up a pretense just because he had become a cripple. He forced a tiny smile onto his lips and said, Senior Feng, I'm the one who asked Xian'er to bring me here. Please don't blame her for this. Feng Beichuan shook his head with a smile. You should focus on recuperating first. Everything else can wait. Big brother benefactor, let's carry you back first. Feng Xian'er said, Mother has just finished cooking a pot of bamboo soup. I'm sure you'll like it. The duo carried Xianxia and walked him towards their destination with incredible care. Xianxia resumed staring forward at nothing in particular. This was the Phoenix's ancestral ground, and it was situated at the center of 10,000 Beast Mountain Range. Everything except the scarlet sky above his head was practically the same as he remembered. It was probably a barrier the Phoenix spirit had set up to protect the Phoenix clan. 5 years ago, the barrier had already existed when he and Feng Xian'er showed up. Perhaps it had existed even before that. "Senior Feng," Xianxia spoke up suddenly, "you all knew that I was crippled from the beginning, didn't you?" The palms that were supporting him tightened a little in unison. Feng Beichuan's footsteps slowed a little before he turned around to look at Xianxia amiably. "Lord Phoenix God informed us of this when he delivered you to us 10 days ago." "Xianxia, my profound cultivation is pretty mediocre," Feng Beichuan continued after a pause. "But even I understand that this is something you won't be able to accept. However, no matter what happens to you now or in the future, you will always be our greatest benefactor. This will never change. Don't lose heart, big brother benefactor." Feng Xian'er forced a smile onto his face. "This is all just a temporary thing. Maybe you'll regain your powers slowly after you've recuperated. And even if you can't recover your lost powers, you can just cultivate again from the beginning. Right, Amen?" Feng Xian'er nodded firmly. "Big brother benefactor is so amazing. You were invincible throughout the world when you were just 20 or so years old. If you want to, you'll definitely become as great as before. No, you'll become even greater than before." Feng Beichuan looked away and let out a sigh on the inside. Xianxia smiled bitterly. "Thank you." Back when he had first encountered them, the brother and sister were only 8 years old. At the time, they had looked up to him with such reverence that their eyes looked like shining stars. Although they had both grown up since then, they were still looking at him in admiration and reverence. However, they didn't know that the man they had been admiring and chasing after since they were 8 years old had become a complete cripple, and that he would never recover for eternity. In fact, his current condition was even worse than when his profound veins were crippled before he was 16 years old. At the time, he was at least at first level of the elementary profound realm, and was able to generate a spark of profound light. Sometime later, a low, dying tree entered his darkened vision. Its branches were wilted, its crooked trunk looked like it would collapse at any moment, and its few remaining dry leaves groaned with death as a breeze touched them during their final moments. It looked like an old man that was nearing the end of its lifespan. "I would like to sit there for a moment." Xianxia pointed at the old tree and whispered. Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er opened their mouths slightly as they stared at Feng Beichuan with a pleading look in their eyes. The latter nodded with conflicted eyes after a moment. The brother and sister carried Xianxia to the tree and allowed him to lean against its trunk, facing the wind and a nice, long view. Xianxia wanted to calm down and force himself into accepting his current reality, but his willpower and his mind seemed to have sunk into a bottomless abyss with no escape in sight. "I would like some quiet to myself." Xianxia stared towards the front and whispered softer than even the mountain breeze blowing towards him. Feng Beichuan nodded slightly and accepted his request. Unlike the innocent Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er, he knew far more about the despair Xianxia was experiencing. "But you can't stay out here for too long, okay? You'll get cold. Big brother and I will come over and take you back later." Feng Xian'er reminded him in worry before she finally left him. She kept looking back towards him even as she left. Whoosh! The breeze finally grew slightly stronger, strong enough to carry Xianxia's messy hair into the air. However, his eyes still remained blank and spiritless, and the bleakness in his heart hadn't faded in the slightest. His eyes had returned to normal. The rock bits slightly beyond his vision were a blur to him. A bird was chirping right beside his ears, but he had no idea when it had become perched next to him. A dry leaf landed on his shoulder, but he couldn't sense the trajectory of its fall. His life would always be like this, now and forever. Gray, when he was 16 years old, Jasmine had remade his profound veins and given him new life. When he was 17 years old, he had participated in the Blue Wind ranking tournament as a representative of the Blue Wind Imperial family for Kang Yue, winning first place and making history for both the Blue Wind Imperial family and the whole nation. When he was 19 years old, he had single-handedly destroyed one of the 4 great sects of the Blue Wind Empire, Burning Heaven Clan. In the same year, he had traveled to the Divine Phoenix Empire and participated in the profound Sky 7 Nation ranking tournament as a representative of the Blue Wind Empire. once again defeating every genius from all 6 opposing nations single-handedly, and stunning the entire profound sky continent. When he was 21 years old, he had survived the profound arc accident and arrived at the illusory demon realm. During the Demon Empress Grand Ceremony, he had fought 6 battles in a row, criticized the 7 clans harshly, reunited illusory demon realm, and crushed Duke Hui's scheme to dust. He had saved both the Yun family and the demon emperor lineage from the brink of destruction. When he was 22 years old, he had returned to the profound sky continent, broken into divine phoenix sect by force, and forced them into ceasing fire and apologizing, saving Blue Wind Nation from the brink of destruction. When he was 24 years old, Xuanyuan Wenchen had achieved the divine way, but he had ultimately defeated him and saved the profound sky continent and the illusory demon realm from calamity. He was known as the foremost person of the continent afterwards. When he was 25 years old, he had accompanied Mu Bingyun to the Snow Song realm and defeated every genius in divine ice phoenix sect at the heavenly Netherfrost Lake, becoming Mu Xuanian's direct disciple as a result. When he was 26 years old, he had escaped to Darkia realm alone and wreaked havoc on its realm king's sect, Black Soul Divine Sect. He was even indirectly complicit in its ultimate destruction. When he was 28 years old, he had participated in the Profound God Convention, defeated 4 god children of the Eastern region, and even triggered a 9-stage heavenly tribulation in the end. He shocked the entire world with his feats and caused every god emperor present to offer him an olive branch. Finally, when he was 29 years old, or just 10 days ago, he had broken into the star god realm alone, unleashed a forbidden power as a divine king, and slaughtered an elder and 1,500 star guards. 13 years were a very short time to a profound practitioner. In the god realm, it barely counted as several flashes of time during one's cultivation. However, Yun Qi had spent just 8 years to become the #1 cultivator of a continent, and another 4 to stun the entire god realm. From the lower realms to the god realm, and then from the lower star realms to the unparalleled king realms, his every step had astounded the world. In fact, it wouldn't even be an exaggeration to say that he was creating miracles every time he made a move. He had the divine inheritances of 5 ancient true gods, namely the evil god, the dragon god, the phoenix, the golden crow, and the ice phoenix. He also possessed the divine arts belonging to the creation goddess of life, rage god, and heavenly wolf star god. Not only had this never happened in the past, it was literally an unrepeatable miracle. In the end, though, everything had died with him, and they would stay dead for the rest of eternity. That wasn't his only loss, either. He had lost the red sword imprint on his arm, meaning that he would never be able to summon the heaven-smiting devil slayer sword and see Xian'er again. Moreover, the sky poisoned Pearl and He Ling the wood spirit, the girl who had gambled everything she had and transformed into the poisoned spirit for revenge. They too had vanished when he had died in the star god realm. The flames of Nirvana might have succeeded in resurrecting him in his weakest form, but there was no way it could have resurrected both Xian'er and He Ling as well. The reason I managed to save Blue Wind Nation for Yuer was because I had enough strength. It was also why I had managed to save Grandfather and Lingxi, find father and mother in the illusory demon realm, meet Zuer, save both the Demon Emperor's line and the illusory demon realm for Kei, and return to the Azure Cloud continent to find Linger and Master. Grandfather, father, mother, Yuanba, Yuer, Lingxi, Zuer, Kei, Linger. I'm back. But how can I face you all now that I've become a cripple? Back at the God realm, he wasn't able to return to Blue Pole Star because he was watched by Kaianai Yinger and countless other powerful people there. If he had acted rashly and allowed his enemies to discover his tracks, he would have brought calamity upon the people he cared about and the entire Blue Pole Star itself. But right now, his return was perfect. He didn't leave any traces behind, and no one in the God realm had a clue that he was still alive. The pressure and danger the God realm had posed was completely gone too. But he raised his arm bit by bit. For the first time, he was able to raise it completely into the air. The wind blew a dry leaf to his arm. The dry leaf had completely lost its green, and it made not a sound of life even though it was flying with the wind. Yun Qi stared quietly at the leaf, looking dazed and listless. Since the day he met Jasmine, the next 13 years had felt like a dream he had unfortunately woken up from. After he had awoken from his dream, it turned out that he was still the broken, useless Yun Qi, scorned and disdained, a cripple who could do nothing but rely on Xiao Lai and Xiao Lingxi for protection. What was even more difficult to accept was that his innumerable efforts, his many brushes with death, his convictions, his pursuits, had all turned into nothing. If that was all, he still would have had hope. He could have started fighting and pursuing again just like 13 years ago. But he had lost even the ability to dream. Time passed soundlessly. Yun Qi's world remained gray even now. What else do I still have the way I am now? Life, what is life? For my whole life, I've worked hard and grown stronger again and again to survive and to lead a better life. However, I've also encountered some people and things that I'm willing to risk or even give my own life for. But now, I've regained my life, but being alive is all I have. Big brother benefactor? A girl's voice came from the distance. It was a true and melodious voice, but it failed to stir any emotion behind Yun Qi's pupils at all. Feng Xian'er gently landed beside him. She was using one of the most basic arts of the mortal way, the profound floating technique that even a sky-profound realm-profound practitioner could perform. But to him, it was an extravagant hope that he could never, ever reach again. She tried to lift Yun Qi up to his feet. You've been here for a very long time already, and you're going to catch a cold if you stay here any longer. Let's head home now, okay? A cold. Once upon a time, he could have stood in the middle of a storm that could crush mountains as solidly as a rock. But now, he had fallen so low that he needed to watch out for chills. Leave me. He pushed Feng Xian'er's hand away with whatever strength he had left. Big brother benefactor. Feng Xian'er caught his arm again. Please listen to me, will you? Everyone's so worried about you. You haven't eaten anything since you've awakened, so I'm sure you're hungry already. Mother's cooked a lot of great food besides the bamboo soup, you know. Leave me. Yun Qi's voice abruptly grew heavier. Feng Xian'er might have tried to be as gentle as possible with her words, but they were no different from ice-cold stings to Yun Qi. He said coldly, "You'll never call me big brother benefactor again? That man is dead already. The one in front of you is nothing but a useless cripple. Get it?" Feng Xian'er's lips parted slightly in shock. It was clear that she was startled by Yun Qi's reaction. Her eyes immediately turned watery as she bit her lips in an attempt to keep herself from breaking into tears. Big brother benefactor, please don't be like this. You'll get better, you'll definitely get better. You don't understand. Yun Qi looked away. You don't understand anything, go, leave me. Big brother benefactor, can't you understand what I'm talking about? Yun Qi's voice grew heavier, go. Cough, cough, cough. A gust of mountain wind entered his mouth, causing him to cough painfully and violently. The girl stared at him helplessly, the tears she tried so hard to hold in finally sliding down her cheeks. She would never forget that gentle, great figure who had descended from the sky like a god and saved them from danger. Since then, she had done everything she could just to get closer to him. But why? No, you're not like this. Feng Xian'er shook her head as tears streaked down her cheeks soundlessly. Back then, you weren't afraid of those bad people at all, even though you were hurt so badly. You didn't hesitate in the slightest, even though the Phoenix trial was very difficult. Big brother benefactor. She bit down on her lips harder and harder until everything turned into a heart-shattering cry. I hate the way you are right now. Feng Xian'er turned around and flew away while covering her mouth. Her tears occasionally fell down from the sky. Yun Qi closed his eyes as the trace of a pathetic, bitter smile crossed his lips. Heh, to think that I would say such harsh words to a girl who cared for me with all her heart. I had always thought that my heart was strong, but I was just fooling myself after all. It was at this moment a tall figure slowly walked up to him and stood next to the old tree. It was Feng Beichuan. Sorry, Yun Qi said without strength. Feng Beichuan shook his head. There's no need. She's only come into contact with the world for less than 2 years, and she hasn't experienced any true hardships or changes in her life yet. It's no wonder she doesn't understand. Yun Qi. A long time ago, our ancestor made a grave mistake and was punished by Lord Phoenix God with a bloodline curse. He could never cultivate beyond the elementary profound realm. After that, he led his clan here to hide from outsiders. Back then, I told you that the reason he did this was to atone for his sins and protect his clansmen. But in reality, Feng Beichuan let out a soft sigh. It was mostly because he was completely disheartened after losing all of his profound energy. Yun Qi. Although I've never experienced a roller coaster like this personally, the heights you've reached are so much higher than what our ancestor had achieved, and the abyss you've fallen into so much grayer. That is why I know that what you're feeling right now is hundreds, thousands of times worse than our ancestors. Our ancestor never broke free from his nightmare. He passed away in depression at an early age. Feng Beichuan turned to look at Yun Qi. But what about you? Yun Qi couldn't say anything. The sky started to darken as evening approached. The mountain breeze was starting to turn chilly. You were already titled the foremost at such a young age, so I'm sure that you've gone through countless dangers and tempering in your life. However, the one you're facing now may be your biggest trial yet. While you were unconscious, you spoke the names of many people, so I believe that you still have many regrets and worries in your heart. If that is true, I'm sure you will not resign yourself to oblivion. Give me some time, Yun Qi muttered. Feng Beichuan nodded and turned away. We will not spread word of your stay here until the day you're willing to set out again. The day grew darker and darker. The moon had risen before Yun Qi realized it, and starlight pierced through the gaps between the tree leaves to bathe him in light. Somehow, it made him feel even colder and more alone. Since no one had come to disturb him after Feng Beichuan's departure, he just stayed there unmoving as if he was nothing more but a corpse. His eyes continued to stare aimlessly. Big brother benefactor. It was at this moment a girl's voice rang beside him yet again. She was holding a hot bowl of soup, and her reddened eyes made it clear that she had been crying for a very long time. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said something like that to you. Please don't get angry with me, please. Yun Qi didn't move a muscle. The girl walked closer and spoke timidly as if she was a child who had just committed a grave mistake. You just woke up, and you've been starving for a day. This is a new bowl of soup, mother, and I boiled together. Please drink some, will you? Yun Qi's dry lips parted slightly. I'm not hungry. His voice sounded both weak and raspy. He no longer had a divine physique which could forego food or drink. He had suffered the wind for an entire day, and he hadn't eaten or drunk anything just as long. Right now, he was far weaker than when he had just woken up, and his vision had been blurry since a long while ago. Feng Xian'er didn't try to change his mind further. She knelt quietly beside Yun Qi and kept him company in silence. She held her soup on her lap and kept it protected carefully with profound energy, not allowing any breeze or dust to enter the bowl. Xian'er's eyes slowly turned distant as she said softly, Did you know? Big brother and I worked hard to cultivate every day after both you and big sister Zuruo were gone. From elementary profound realm, to true profound realm, spirit profound realm, earth profound realm, sky profound realm, emperor profound realm, every time I achieved a breakthrough, I would be overjoyed and shouting your name happily in my heart, because I'd finally gotten closer to you again. Yun Qi. Later on, big brother and I were finally allowed to leave, so we traveled the entire profound sky continent, and visited quite a few places in the illusory demon realm as well. Your legend is everywhere no matter where we go, you know? You saved Blue Wind Nation, the illusory demon realm, and the profound sky continent. You are a god not only to us, but also the entire continent. The places you'd gone to, Floating Cloud City, New Moon Profound Palace, Wasteland of Death, Blue Wind Profound Palace, Demon Imperial City, and more, we visited all of them. I'd be so happy every time I heard any rumor that was related to you. Big brother and I wanted to meet you again so much, but we later heard that you'd left this world to go to a higher plane. Sometime after that, we ran into Big Sister Phoenix Goddess, and she told us that you were the one who had saved us again 5 years ago, and that you were also the one who had left behind the complete version of the world ode of the Phoenix and those miraculous spirit pellets. It was at that moment we knew that you'd never forgotten about us even after you'd become a legend. I cried a lot on that day. Even Big Brother shed a lot of tears while he comforted me. A beautiful, soft smile appeared around the corner of her lips, but her face was streaked in tears. Yun Qi had never realized that his careless gift would strike such a deep chord in the duo's hearts. You're not just a benefactor to me, Feng Xian'er whispered quietly like she was talking in her sleep. You are the goal I decided to spend my entire life chasing after since I was 8 years old, and you are the sky in my heart. She turned around and stared at him dazedly. The sky may rain or turn gray, but it can never truly fall on our heads, right? The tears in her eyes looked like starlight. They slipped soundlessly into his heart and soul. He might be a cripple now, but he was still the sky in another's heart. The light of her tears entered the darkened world, and Yun Qi opened his mouth slightly before turning to look at her. Xian'er, I'm feeling a little hungry. Can you feed me? Right now, he honestly didn't have the strength to lift his arms. Feng Xian'er's teary eyes trembled once before she nodded with great force. She raised the bowl and grabbed a delicate-looking wooden spoon that she had made herself. Although she was at the Emperor Profound realm, her fingers felt weak to her for some reason. She had to gather nearly all of her concentration to successfully push the filled spoon gently into Yun-Chi's mouth. The warm liquid entered his body and brushed gently against his mind. Yun-Chi looked up slightly to the infinitely gray sky again, and for the first time he saw many beautiful stars that he had unconsciously neglected before. It had been a long, long time since he last had a girl feed him like this. Xiao Lingxi had been the only one to do so during this life, and Su Linger in his last. Western Divine Region, Dragon God Realm, Forbidden Land of Samsara. Shenzai's figure and countenance were covered by white mist. The only thing that was revealed was a vague outline. Beside her, a tall, imposing figure stood with a serious expression on his face. Although he wasn't circulating any aura, an invisible, draconic might seem to fall naturally from the heavens and silence the entire space that was the forbidden land of Samsara. Has the evil infant truly come back to life? Shenzai asked. Amen. Dragon Monarch nodded. All 4 god emperors of the Eastern Divine Region fought a terrible battle against the evil infant in the Star God realm, and while Qianai Fanchen, Zhou Xuzi, and Xing Jukong were injured terribly in that battle, Yue Wuya passed away because his injuries were too severe. Xing Jukong has gone missing, but he has probably just gone into hiding due to the severe damage done to his heart and soul. Qianai Fanchen and Zhou Xuzi's injuries were pretty severe as well, and the level of devilish energy they were tainted with was extremely high. It will take them several years, or even several dozen years, to flush it completely from their systems. A huge number of star gods, moon gods, guardians, and Brahma kings perished in that battle as well. Considering how terrifying the evil infant already is when she has just awakened, the consequences of not finding her soon are unimaginable. The Dragon Monarch looked incredibly solemn. For the past 200,000 years, he has been the strongest, highest, and most untouchable existence in the entire God realm and primal chaos. But today, an ancient power that surpasses his had resurfaced, and it possessed the ability to threaten any living being or race in the world. Does this mean that the Dragon God realm is prepared to send someone to the Eastern Divine Region to seek out the evil infant? Shenzai asked. There is no other way. The Dragon Monarch nodded with deep eyes. The world-destroying devil wheel isn't something that matters to the Eastern Divine Region only. Even the 6 king realms of the Western Divine Region will be sending their main force to the Eastern Divine Region in the hope that they can hunt down the evil infant while it is still weakened in the shortest time possible. The Southern Divine Region is acting similarly as well. In the past, the Eastern Divine Region would have stopped this no matter what, but this time they were actually urging the 2 divine regions to act faster. Dragon Monarch exhaled slightly before continuing. Both Brahma Monarch Realm and Eternal Heaven Realm are incredibly powerful, but even they were scared out of their wits after just one battle. It doesn't take much to imagine just how scary the evil infant is. There's one more thing I need to tell you, but you probably knew it already. Dragon Monarch suddenly changed the subject and said, Yun-Chi passed away during the evil infant calamity as well. But did you happen to know why he had suddenly traveled to the Star God realm without warning? According to Zhou Xuzi, he even passed through the absolute star soul barrier somehow. How strange, Shenzai answered indifferently. What's the point of knowing this if he's already dead? It's just such a shame. The Dragon Monarch shook his head before letting out a sigh. He was an unparalleled genius who attracted a 9-stage heavenly tribulation. I'm not sure if someone like him will ever appear in the God realm again, even if another 1,000,000 years were to pass. To think that he would perish this soon, especially when you'd even broken your golden rule for him. A misty look flitted across Shenzai's eyes for a moment, and she asked slowly, I heard that the evil infant's host is the heavenly slaughter star god. That's right. Are you sure that she is just the host? The Dragon Monarch looked a little surprised before he turned around to look at her in puzzlement. What do you mean? The way the evil infant's wheel of myriad tribulations returned to life had been largely different from her initial expectations. But instead of explaining herself, she replied softly, What I mean to say is it possible that she isn't the host of the evil infant's wheel of myriad tribulations, but the master? That is absolutely impossible. Dragon Monarch shook his head without hesitation. The first thing the evil infant did after she had awakened was to slaughter the people of the Star God realm. If the heavenly slaughter star god hadn't been robbed of her body and soul, why would she kill her fellow star gods, wound her own father, and destroy nearly the entire star god realm? Emotions stirred behind Shenzai's eyes. Qi's figure and the absolute determination he had shown her just before he left surfaced inside her heart. Moreover, the evil infant's wheel of myriad tribulations and the heaven-punishing ancestral sword were the two strongest artifacts of the primal chaos. One of them was absolutely evil, and the other absolutely holy. Back in the days of the era of gods, the evil infant's wheel of myriad tribulations never had a master. Even the head of the creation gods, the heaven-punishing devil emperor, wasn't worthy of becoming the heaven-punishing ancestral sword's master, and could only command it to a very limited degree. How could there be anyone who could command the evil infant's wheel of myriad tribulations in this day and age? Xianxia nodded slightly as if she was acknowledging the truth behind his words. "Oh right, where is He Ling? Why don't I see her?" Dragon Monarch looked around a little. "She has found her true calling. Naturally, I couldn't keep her here." Xianxia replied before turning around. Her gentle voice sounded like flying cotton in the wind. "You may go. My mental state is in a bit of a disorder as of late. I need to go into seclusion for a time, and you will be busy dealing with the evil infant yourself. You may not see me for a short period of time." The Dragon Monarch raised his arms slightly, but in the end he nodded. "All right. Kainai Fanshan and Zhou Zuzi are currently being plagued by the devilish energy from that battle. If they decide to come to you during their time of need, but you are unwilling to help them at that time, then I will show up and turn them away for you." Xianxia nodded imperceptibly. "Considering that you enjoy the company of a wood spirit, should I go find another one like Linger for you?" "That is unnecessary. You may go." Finally, the Dragon Monarch left the scene. When the Draconic Might left the forbidden land of Samsara, the water started flowing, the birds started chirping, and the butterflies started flapping their wings once more. Xianxia stood alone in this world, accompanied by neither He Ling nor Qianxia. He willingly went to his death for her, whereas she woke the evil infant for him. Xianxia spoke quietly to herself. Human emotions are so subtle. She stretched out her perfectly white arm in front of herself, and in her palm sat a delicate, vermilion-colored crystal. Her eyes misted slightly before she whispered to herself, "One who knew that our reunion would be this short. But considering that you are a carefree soul, I'm sure you have no lingering regrets." She slowly gripped the vermilion crystal, but a sudden thought caused her to open her palm again. Her eyes went blank with shock. She's asleep. He's still alive. Profound Sky Continent, Blue Wind Nation, at the center of the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range where the Phoenix clan lived. Qi's arrival was without a doubt great news to this little lost clan. Ever since Feng Xian'er words and tears had opened a tiny gap in Qi's darkened, deadened heart, he was no longer the same person he was during the first day. Since the start of the second day, he started building up his terribly weak body consciously and stopped rejecting rest, food, and drink. Sometimes, he would even reveal a smile or two. However, most of his time he was still blanking out, feeling lost, and looking indescribably pitiful and lonely. 5 days later, he was able to walk for a short period with Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er supporting him. 10 days later, he could take a few steps on his own without aid. Everyone here treated him with incredible kindness. Not only did they think of him as a benefactor they could never repay in full, they hadn't looked down on him because he had become a cripple even once. It was the good karma he had sowed himself many years ago. Back when he still had the divine body of a dragon god and the rage god arts, he had been able to recover fully in a day even when he was near death. Of course, his current recovery rate was absolutely nothing like before. Slow his recovery might be, but he was without a doubt improving every day. Time passed quickly, and before he knew it, it had been almost a month since his return. By now, he could walk on his own for a very long distance. His body wasn't as numb and weak as it was before. He could address every resident by their names, and the smile on his face seemed to appear even more frequently than before. However, he hadn't once requested to leave the Phoenix clan. In fact, he hadn't even asked anyone about the outside world. Sky Continent's aura was thin and dirty. However, the Phoenix clan's residence was undoubtedly a pure utopia-like place in the profound Sky Continent. Time slowly passed by. After Qian had regained his ability to walk, he visited many places within the valley every day. He was slowly recovering and getting closer the normal energy level of an average mortal. Summer passed, and autumn arrived. Qi's footsteps remained somewhat slow as the autumn leaves flew all over the place. No one tried to lend him a hand, although Feng Xian'er was following him every step of the way. They were at the Phoenix ruins, and the phoenix's barrier meant that neither outsiders nor profound beasts would be able to disturb their peace. However, Feng Xian'er just couldn't help but worry over Xianxia. The path ahead of them was filled with stones. There wasn't any undergrowth anywhere to be seen. However, the path was covered in a thick layer of autumn leaves for some reason, and when Xianxia stepped on them, he nearly lost his balance. Feng Xian'er hurriedly caught up to him and held him steady by the arm. "It's okay," Xianxia smiled at her. "I can walk all the way back myself without problems if need be." Right after he said this, he noticed that Feng Xian'er was staring towards the front with a bit of a distant look in her eyes. "Do you remember, Big Brother Benefactor?" Feng Xian'er said softly. "This is where we first met each other." Xia's mind went blank for a moment before he stared towards the front as well. "Back then, Big Brother and I were captured by a group of bad people called the Black Demons. It was here I encountered Big Sister Zuruo, and you before Big Sister Zuruo sent those bad people packing and saved us." To Feng Xian'er, the memories of that day was something precious she would never forget for the rest of her life. Not to mention that it was also the turning point of her fate. Big Sister Zuruo is such a beautiful and kind person. Not only had she saved us from trouble, she promised to save our entire clan as well. At the time, you were unconscious, dirty, and bleeding a lot. Big Brother Benefactor. However, Big Sister Zuruo didn't seem to mind it at all. She carried you all the way back to our home. You may have suffered some serious injuries back then, Big Brother Benefactor. But Big Brother and I thought that you were a very blessed person. Xianxia, I wonder how Big Sister Zuruo, Empress Sis is doing. Feng Xian'er said sincerely while looking towards the distance. There's one thing I'm sure of though, and that is she must be missing you a lot, Big Brother Benefactor. Feng Xian'er's words brought Xianxia all the way back to 13 years ago. The memories were incredibly clear in his mind, and yet they also felt like they were from another lifetime. If he were to say that Jasmine was the first turning point of his fate, then his encounter with Kang Yue, the girl who had called herself Lan Zuruo at the time, was without a doubt the second. Junior brother Yun, I'll leave with you the moment I've fulfilled Royal Father's wishes. Princess, the royal family, I can give up everything. Senior sister, your tears are too precious, so precious that I have no choice but to exchange my life for them. The reason why I said those words was because I was uneasy and afraid. I do not know if I had actually entered Senior Sister's heart because Senior Sister was so good to me and was also a princess. I, on the other hand, am powerless and of low birth. Other than my pride, hot-headedness, and my feelings for you, I have nothing else. Therefore, I was really uneasy and afraid. I selfishly wanted to see if you would shed tears for me. Although everything that had happened during those petty, uncertain days seemed somewhat childish to him right now, the fact that every word and promise had come from the heart remained true. Lan Zuruo, Kang Yue, the royal princess who had fallen in love with him during his lowliest, most uncertain days. The girl had been willing to give up everything just to be with him. Xian'er, Xianxia suddenly spoke up. I wish to visit Blue Wind Imperial City. Feng Xian'er's head turned around as fast as lightning as great joy bloomed between her brows and inside her heart like fireworks. She then nodded strongly. Okay, let's go together. Let's go there right now. Feng Xian'er didn't go away to make preparations or inform any clansmen. It was because she didn't want to give Xianxia any opportunity to hesitate or go back on his words. Feng Xian'er grabbed Xianxia with her bare hands and took to the skies, flying away from the Phoenix clan. For the past time, Xianxia had acted as if someone had sealed him inside the Phoenix clan, as if he couldn't even take a single step beyond its boundaries. However, a small gap had finally opened in his closed heart. When they left the center of the 10,000 mountain range, a pale-colored barrier soon entered their vision. When Feng Xian'er and Xianxia got close, a gap automatically appeared to admit the duo's exit. Soon, they were making way towards the north. When was this barrier erected? Xianxia asked. His determination was starting to waver again when he looked towards the distant north and thought of all the people he was about to meet. Feng Xian'er was in an excellent mood due to Xianxia's change of mind earlier. She replied, Lord Phoenix God didn't just cure us of our bloodline curse back then. It also erected this Phoenix barrier to protect us after the two of you had left the 10,000 Beast mountain range. It was so that we would have enough time grow strong and not suffer the same tragedies as we did many years ago. I see. Xianxia nodded slightly. So, the barrier had been erected after Kang Yue and him had left. It could be that the Phoenix spirit had done it out of regret, because it hadn't expected the bloodline curse to remain active for generations. Or maybe it was because it knew that it didn't have much time left after gifting Xianxia both its divine soul and flame of nirvana. So it converted the last bit of its strength into this power of protection. Back then, the Phoenix Barrier was the one thing that kept us safe when the divine Phoenix Empire invaded Blue Wind Nation en masse. Also, there has been a lot of profound beast disturbances for the past few years, and they have even spread all the way to the 10,000 Beast Mountain not long ago. For whatever reason, the profound beasts nearby have become incredibly scary, although again Lord Phoenix God's barrier has protected us from harm. Feng Xian'er said, "Profound beast disturbance?" Xianxia's gaze turned slightly. "Can you explain further?" Suddenly he sensed Feng Xian'er tensing up a little, and it was at this moment a sharp, clearly violent cry cut through the air before a gigantic blue figure burst out of the undergrowth below and flew towards them like a storm. The blue creature's name immediately flashed across Xianxia's mind. It was a blue scale beast. A blue scale beast was a high-level wind-type earth-profound creature. It mainly fed on grass and bamboo, and it was a gentle animal that seldomly attacked humans or other profound beasts unless someone or something had offended it first. However, this blue scale beast had appeared out of nowhere, and it was charging at them madly with a cry that bordered on insanity. It was almost as if they were its sworn enemy. She to the sixth-stage world ode of the Phoenix and Overlord Pellets Xianxia had left behind many years ago. Feng Xian'er and Feng Xian'er's cultivation had grown by leaps and bounds. Both of them were currently at the Emperor Profound realm, and it was practically impossible for a single Earth Profound-level beast to wound her even if she allowed it to attack her to its heart's content. But Xianxia at his weakened state was a completely different story. If he were to come into contact with the storm conjured by the blue scale beast, he would instantly be crushed into dust. "Watch out!" Feng Xian'er subconsciously cried out in alarm. Xianxia's body couldn't withstand bumps and jolts, so she dared not move as quickly as she was able. Her first reaction was to apply most of her profound energy around Xianxia as a shield in haste before fueling the rest to her phoenix flames. The scarlet flames ignited the wind, and the blue scale beast was mercilessly caught in the blast. It let out a sharp cry before falling straight toward the ground. However, dozens more similar screeches immediately followed suit before an equal number of blue scale beasts suddenly took to the air and rushed them in unison. The entire sky became filled with dangerous gusts in no time. Xianxia was stunned by what he was looking at. What was going on? Why did the blue scale beast suddenly turn so violent? Could he be mistaken about these creatures' identity? "Ah!" Feng Xian'er let out a soft cry, but quickly regained her cool. She immediately ignited a ring of fire around her. The Phoenix divine flames normally put incredible spiritual pressure on the profound beasts. Their natural reaction was to run away in fear, especially since Feng Xian'er was 2 great realms above the blue scale beasts. However, not only were the blue scale beasts not deterred in the slightest, they continued to rush them in a straight line while screeching harsh enough to pierce one's eardrums. It was almost as if they had all gone insane. Feng Xian'er altered her hand gestures slightly in an attempt to burn them all to crisp at once. But a sudden sword blast had preceded her thoughts. Chinese letter? Rip. The sword blast tore apart the storms, space itself, and 3 blue scale beasts in an instant. Then, a white figure appeared from the distance and fired even more sword blasts at the rampaging blue scale beasts, sending them all to the abyss of death. "This person!" Feng Xian'er slowed down a little and parted her lips slightly. "He's so strong." She didn't notice that Xianxia's gaze had frozen for a second before dissolving into unspeakable complications. Xianxia might have lost his spiritual perception, but he still easily recognized the sword the man was wielding. It was the Heaven's Might Absolute Sword. Although the man's figure and sword movements were too swift for him to capture, it didn't prevent Xianxia from guessing his true identity. "Xian'er," Xianxia said quietly, "don't let him see me." "Ah," Feng Xian'er looked surprised, but only for a moment. She quickly surrounded him in a layer of scarlet phoenix flames. The sword continued to swing energetically, and it wasn't long before every blue scale beast in the area and even the chaotic storms had been vanquished into nothingness. The man dressed in white clothes that turned around and flew towards them. He had a handsome figure and a pair of eyes that looked like cold stars. Although the white sword in his hand looked incredibly bland, its light was unbearably sharp in the man's hand. The man shot a glance at Feng Xian'er before a bit of surprise passed through his features. "Are you a member of the Divine Phoenix sect? It looks like I have acted unnecessarily." It was only now he realized that the girl wielding phoenix flames before him was at the Emperor Profound realm. His intervention really had been unnecessary. "Thank you for your help," Feng Xian'er said politely. "You're welcome, although I'm sure that you'd be able to thwart even 1,000 blue-scale beasts without any trouble." The young man nodded. "I am Ling Jai of Heavenly Sword Villa. If I may ask, why are you here?" "Ah," Feng Xian'er exclaimed. "You're the legendary Blue Wind Sword Saint? No wonder you're so strong." Blue Wind Sword Saint. Xianxia sighed inside his mind. Ling Jai was truly deserving of his reputation. It had only been a few years since they last met each other, but Ling Jai had already surpassed his grandfather Ling Tianyi and took over his title. Ling Jai hadn't gone back on his promise to him back then, and he definitely hadn't gone back against his own will and pursuit. In the future, Ling Jai would definitely rise to a higher place and become the eternal symbol of pride of Heavenly Sword Villa. "It's just false reputation, miss. I don't deserve such praise from you," Ling Jai replied politely. As compared to before, Ling Jai had shed his youthfulness in exchange for an air of maturity and grace just like his older brother, Ling Yun. Feng Xian'er looked like she was in her 20s at best, but her profound energy clearly marked her as an Emperor Profound Realm Profound practitioner. It was no wonder that Ling Jai was caught by surprise. Then, his gaze shifted slightly to fall on Xianxia. Xianxia's appearance was blurred behind a veil of fire, but for some reason Ling Jai still felt a strange tug in his heart. He blurted, "Who is this?" "He's," Feng Xian'er started, but she wasn't sure how to reply to his question. Xianxia looked away before lowering his voice. "Let's go." "Amen," Feng Xian'er replied before lifting Xianxia into the air once more, but then Xianxia turned away and said, "I mean, let's head home." "Ah, head home?" Feng Xian'er looked slightly caught off guard. "Amen, let's head home." Xianxia closed his eyes at first. He thought that the period of calm and tranquility and his increasingly uncontrollable impulse to reach out meant that he was ready to face his family and friends already. But when Ling Jai was actually standing right in front of him, he finally realized that he still wasn't ready. "All right." Feng Xian'er didn't try to force the issue. Instead, she nodded obediently and flew Xianxia back the way they came, in fact. She was so focused that she had even forgotten to bid Ling Jai goodbye. Ling Jai didn't leave immediately. He watched the duo until they vanished beyond the horizon. The focus of his attention wasn't Feng Xian'er, but the figure who was shrouded in red. His heart hadn't stopped tugging at him even once throughout the meeting. Who is he? That man was utterly void of profound energy, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him a mortal among mortals. But why had he given him such a subtle sense of familiarity? Xianxia, as she once again flew back to the heart of the 10,000 Beast Mountain range. It was only when Ling Jai's aura had completely vanished from her spiritual perception that she withdrew the firelight shrouding Xianxia's body. Xianxia's expression was detached and indifferent. "It doesn't matter," Feng Xian'er consoled Xianxia with a faint smile. "Father once said this to us privately. He said that Big Brother Benefactor might need many years before he is willing to leave this place. But it has just been slightly over a month. So Big Brother Benefactor is indeed Big Brother Benefactor. You're truly awesome." Xianxia faintly raised his head, forcing out the turbid air within his chest with a long exhalation. "Was what just happened just now part of the profound beast disturbances you were telling me about?" "MNN," Feng Xian'er said as she nodded her head. "The profound beast rampages appeared not too long ago. In fact, it has not even been a year since they first appeared. It first happened in the easternmost parts of the realm, but after that, it gradually started to spread towards the west, and it has been spreading at a faster and faster speed. I heard that this isn't only happening in Blue Wind Nation, and that a similar situation is also occurring in the eastern part of the illusory demon realm." Xianxia. "However, you don't need to worry," Feng Xian'er said. "Blue Wind Nation is being protected by the Divine Phoenix sect, so every single occurrence of the profound beast rampages has been quickly suppressed. So it isn't really a big affair on the level of a calamity." Profound beast rampages, which began in the east and are spreading towards the west. Feng Xian'er's words reverberated in his skull, but he was unable to focus his attention on them, and they very soon were relegated to the back of his mind. If not for that, he would definitely have thought of something. "You spoke of a phoenix goddess previously. That was referring to Xianxia, correct?" Xianxia asked as the image of a woman of surpassing beauty, status, and talent floated up in his mind's eye. A woman whose beautiful countenance could topple eras, but whose attachment and love towards him surpassed everything else. The single fleeting glimpse he had caught of her before he fainted in Phoenix perching Valley had engraved a mark on his soul that would never fade. Amen? Feng Xian'er nodded her head, a profound look of adoration, reverence, and admiration appearing in her phoenix eyes. Goddess Sis stepped into the mythical divine profound realm 3 years ago, and in the profound sky continent. She is regarded as the other legendary figure besides yourself, Big Brother benefactor. On that day, Big Brother and I saw Goddess Sis. She was very pretty, even prettier than all the stars in the sky. Furthermore, Big Brother and I also knew that she was Big Brother benefactor's fiancé. Am I right? Xianxia's eyes misted over due to his sorrow. Xian'er had already successfully stepped into the divine way, and she had already done so 3 years ago. Xuanyuan Wenshan's power at that time had indeed already reached the level of the divine way, but it was a distorted divine way that was accomplished by relying on heretical means. It was a method that rendered him unable to ever make any advancements in his power, one that would also continuously devour his lifespan. His own divine way, however, was only accomplished in the snow song realm. In the profound sky continent, in the entire blue pole star, Feng Xian'er was undoubtedly the first person to truly step into the divine profound realm. With her around, the profound beast disturbances, or even calamities even more serious than that, were things that she could easily quash. The illusory demon realm has Kei, father, mother, and the rest of them to protect it. But I? Upon not receiving Xianxia's reply, Feng Xian'er looked ahead, her eyes misting over. Her lips parted as she seemed to mutter what was on her mind to herself. It's also only a fairy like Goddess Sis who's worthy of Big Brother benefactor. Xianxia felt as if his heart had been fiercely stabbed by something. She was like an ancient legend come to life in the profound sky continent. She was the Phoenix goddess, and her beauty could be said to be #1 in the entire profound sky continent. Whereas the current him was merely a cripple. He no longer had the qualifications to stand side by side with her, much less protect her or even deserve her attachment and love. Given his presently mortal body and his inability to cultivate any profound strength, even if they plied him with a mountain of elixirs and spirit herbs, he would not live longer than 100-odd years. For the first goddess in this entire continent to be married to a cripple, cold air washed over his body, causing Xianxia to erupt into a painful coughing fit. Ah! Feng Xian'er anxiously turned around as she hurriedly slowed down. Am I flying too fast? Let me slow down a little. Xianxia shook his head. In my lifetime, there were many times where I would assume a position of superiority to advise or mock many others. There were also countless times that I had coldly looked on in contempt upon witnessing another person's gloom and despair. At that time, I was very convinced that there would never be a day that I, who did not even fear death, would end up in the same condition. But I never imagined that I would end up realizing that sometimes living on was far harder than dying. If I had been an ordinary person my entire life, then I would be used to this for my entire life, and perhaps I would even enjoy this ordinariness. But to think that returning to being ordinary overnight, after having lived that grand dream for 13 years, would actually be so unbearably cruel. Oh, that's right, Feng Xian'er's voice rang in his ears. Right now Goddess Sis is the Divine Phoenix sect master. After the previous sect master Feng Henkong passed on his position to her, he focused on governing the Divine Phoenix Empire. Because of this, the Divine Phoenix sect has risen up to become one of the 4 great sacred grounds of the profound sky continent. Yet they are not the leader of the 4. Does Big Brother benefactor want to guess which sacred ground is standing at the head of the 4? Xianxia. It's Frozen Cloud Asgard, Feng Xian'er said with a faint smile. Even though the consolidated strength of Frozen Cloud Asgard cannot be compared to the other 3 sacred grounds, Big Brother benefactor was once the Asgard master of Frozen Cloud Asgard. It is for that reason, and that reason alone, that no one will question their place at the head of the 4 sacred grounds. That is the power of Big Brother benefactor's influence. To think that Frozen Cloud Asgard had actually become a member of the profound sky continent's new 4 sacred grounds, and they were even at the head of them at that. But if the people of the world knew that I had already become a cripple, then this special glory would definitely disappear like smoke. The thoughts of the current Xianxia were all focused on the negative. He was very aware of his current gloomy mood and disposition, and he truly desired to be rid of it. Yet he did not have the power to be free from it. He had used a short 13 years to reach a height that other people would not even dare dream of, even if they had 100 lifetimes to spare. Yet in the span of a day, he had fallen straight to the bottom. No one could imagine or understand what kind of blow this was. The Phoenix barrier appeared in their vision, and as Feng Xian'er approached, a gap once more automatically appeared in the barrier. After passing through the gap, the duo had once again returned to the lands of the Phoenix clan. Once they entered the barrier, Xianxia felt as if the panic that had been brought about by the outside world had been completely blocked off from him, and his chaotic heart regained much of its composure. Following that, the corners of his lips hooked up in a cold, self-deprecating smile. Feng Xian'er had been covertly keeping an eye on Xianxia all this while, and upon observing his expression, her heart felt sore. She said in a soft voice, "Big brother benefactor, I don't know what I can do to help you. But no matter what happens in the future, I will always be by your side until you don't want to see me anymore." The warmth that had risen in his soul every now and then over this period of time had largely been due to Feng Xian'er. In his lifetime, he had endured countless gazes of respect, admiration, adoration, and flattery. It had gotten to the point where he was numb to it all, and his heart was not the least bit stirred by any of it since a long time ago. However, he had fallen on hard times now, and it would be this way forevermore. This was merely one of the countless girls whose lives had intersected with his in this life. Yet she still focused all of her attention and heart on him without any reservation whatsoever. During this period of time, her existence and her company had wiped away an untold amount of gloomy haze in Xianxia's heart. If not for her, Xianxia might have sunk into an even deeper depression for an even longer amount of time. It was just that the current him did not know how he could respond to or repay these far too precious feelings and intentions. Feng Xian'er flew extremely slowly, afraid the cold wind would harm Xianxia. Or perhaps it was because she enjoyed this feeling of being able to protect him, this feeling of being able to be close to him. The scenery below them slowly flowed by. Because they had met blue-scale beasts, the path they had taken to return was different from the path they had used to depart. The area below them was an area Xianxia had never come across before, and as they flew past a tiny mountain forest that swirled with dry leaves, he spied a small bamboo forest that was still emerald green. In the heart of that bamboo grove, he could faintly make out the shape of a small and delicate bamboo hut. A bamboo hut. Xianxia's eyes zoomed in on the hut, and he was unable to look away for a very long time. During his life in the Azure Cloud Continent, after he had watched Su Linger's beauty pass from life to death in his very arms, he would feel as if thousands of arrows had pierced his heart every time he looked at a bamboo hut. Even though he had managed to find Su Linger once more, the bamboo hut remained an extremely special existence in his heart, and every time he saw one, his heart would be profoundly touched. "Linger, are you doing well in the illusory demon realm? You are so intelligent, so you've definitely already become a very awesome divine doctor by now. After all, that was your dream all those years ago. I want to see that bamboo hut." As thoughts of Su Linger surged into his heart, he could not help but speak those words. Bamboo hut. Feng Xian'er was slightly stunned by those words, but once she realized what Xianxia was saying, she immediately opened her mouth to say something. But upon witnessing Xianxia's clearly dazed expression, she swallowed the words she was about to say and gave a light nod of her delicate head instead. "All right." She lightly floated to the ground together with Xianxia, but she did not land in front of the bamboo hut. Instead, she had landed in front of the bamboo grove the bamboo hut was located in. Feng Xian'er's movements caused Xianxia's brows to twitch slightly as an expression of puzzlement appeared on his face. As the bluish-green bamboo swayed, cool breezes which smelled fresh and clean danced within it. Even though they stood in front of the bamboo forest, Feng Xian'er did not bring Xianxia into it. Instead, she simply stood there while supporting Xianxia's body, and her grip seemed to have grown a lot tighter than before. "What's wrong?" Xianxia asked. He could sense that Feng Xian'er had clearly grown somewhat tense. Feng Xian'er replied, "There are people who live inside that bamboo hut, and they are not our clansmen." "Oh," Xianxia said as if deep in thought. "Have they been living there since a very long time ago? I don't recall any of you mentioning this before." "No," Feng Xian'er said as she shook her head. "They were people that only came to this place after Big Brother Benefactor left all those years ago." "After I left," Xianxia said in astonishment. "But you said before that this Phoenix barrier was something that was only erected after I had left all those years ago, and only those who possessed the Phoenix bloodline could pass through it. Then how could it be people from the Divine Phoenix Empire's Divine Phoenix sect?" "That is, I don't know," Feng Xian'er still shook her head, "because they have never once interacted with us. We had once tried to get closer to them and tried to help them all those years ago, but every attempt was rejected by them. So father and mother said that they were probably very hurt by something in the past, so now they are afraid of coming into contact with people. As a result, we also decided not to disturb them any further. Moreover, so many years have passed by, but they not only have not left this place, they have rarely even left this bamboo grove. However, since they were able to come to this place, they should also possess the phoenix's bloodline, Feng Xian'er said somewhat speculatively. Xianxia's eyebrows furrowed. In this entire continent, besides the Phoenix clan who lived in this place, the only other people who possessed the Phoenix's bloodline were the members of the Divine Phoenix sect. But why would people from the Divine Phoenix sect come to this place? Furthermore, upon hearing Feng Xian'er's recounting of their tale, it seemed as if they actually shunned any sort of contact in a rather extreme manner. Xianxia seemed to be in deep thought as he said, "Since that is the case, let's not bother them then. Let's leave." Upon saying those words, he glanced at the arm which Feng Xian'er was clearly gripping too tightly as he said in a half-joking manner, "Could it be that the women who secluded themselves in there look very scary? You seem to be really tense." It was at this moment that Feng Xian'er seemed to notice something, and her two hands which held Xianxia's arms hurriedly relaxed their grasp before she said, "That's not the case. It's just that there is a very scary little monster that lives inside there, and I'm just afraid that she will hurt you by accident." "Little monster?" Just as Xianxia voiced his suspicions, an exceptionally young and tender voice, a voice that was also exceptionally sharp and cutting, suddenly rang out from the bamboo forest. "Immediately leave this place. You're not allowed to approach this place." After that voice had rung out in the air, a little girl strode out of the gently swaying bamboo forest. That little girl only looked about 10 years of age. She was wearing a simple dress that looked tidy and delicate. Even though she was young, her hair that looked like a starry night sky, hung below her waist as it gently danced in the breeze. Her face was white as powder and carved like a jade statue. Her features were extremely adorable, but those bright eyes of hers were vigorously flashing with a fierce light, a light filled with an unspoken threat and vigilance. It was just that she was simply far too adorable as she stood there looking like a beautifully carved and sculpted jade porcelain doll. So even though Xianxia had already lost all of his cultivation, he still felt basically no threat from her at all, despite that fierce look in her eyes and the belligerent aura rolling off her body. But the appearance of this little girl caused Feng Xian'er's hand, which she had just relaxed a little, to tighten again once more. Even her body had clearly gone rigid, and she gripped Xianxia's so hard that he felt a deep ache. Xianxia glanced to the side as he said in an astonished voice, "This can't be the little monster that you've been talking about, right?" Xian'er could respond. The little girl reacted like a cat whose tail had been trod on as she immediately grew enraged. "Who are you calling a little monster?" "Eh?" Xianxia's gaze swiveled back towards the girl. He very sincerely measured the girl with his eyes before giving a faint laugh. "Of course I'm not talking about you. You look so adorable, so how could you be called a little monster?" "HMPH?" The little girl turned up her nose, and it seemed like she quite enjoyed being called adorable by Xianxia. "Little girl, what's your name?" Xianxia asked. But he did not notice one thing. He, whose heart had been mired in gloom, who had been completely disinterested in everything, was actually taking the initiative right now. Furthermore, he had subconsciously started a conversation with her, and his tone and eyes were both strangely warm. The little girl gave a straightforward reply in a stern and bossy voice. "I am Xianxia, and who are you exactly? Why are you approaching this place? Could it be that you don't know that this is the territory of my mother and I?" "Xianxia." Xianxia did not answer her question. Instead, he gave a faint smile as he said, "What a strange, what a nice-sounding name. Who is the one who gave it to you?" "Of course, it was my mother who gave it to me," the little girl said, her starry eyes still filled with vigilance. Her gaze continued to sweep across Xianxia and Feng Xian'er's feet, as if she were using her eyes to warn them that they were absolutely not allowed to take a single step into the area around the bamboo grove. "Wuxin, why did your mother give you such a name?" Xianxia asked yet again. He had also not noticed why he had taken such an interest in the name of this little girl that he had met for the first time. It seemed as if there was some sort of inexplicable force, one that was both mysterious and inexorable, that stirred his desire to understand her more. Feng Xian'er looked towards Xianxia, and she was left dumbfounded for a little while, because the Xianxia in front of her was actually giving a gentle smile that filled his face as he stared unblinkingly at the little girl in the bamboo forest in front of him. It was not that Xianxia had never smiled over the last month or so, but his smiles had always looked very stiff and forced, and they contained a gloominess and pained grief that anyone could sense. But at this moment, the smile that curved up from the corners of his mouth was actually incomparably natural and warm. Feng Xian'er was completely stunned by what she was witnessing, and for a moment, she forgot to pull Xianxia away and leave, to depart from this little monster who looked adorable, but who in reality was extremely dangerous. "My mother said this." The little girl's expression was stern and solemn as she strove to assume a powerful and threatening stance. "All things in this world are filled with bitterness and sorrow. If one does not want to descend into grief and sadness, then one must reach a state where one has no hope and no heart. One must possess no heart before one can have no hope, and one must have no hope before one can experience no sorrow, and it is only once one can experience no sorrow that one can have no regrets." Xianxia was stunned by those words for a moment, but after that he broke out into great laughter. "Ha ha ha, little lady, do you understand what those words mean?" Feng Xian'er. Xianxia's question stunned the girl as well, but after that she roared out in anger. Of course I understand. You still haven't replied my question. Who exactly are you? Why are you approaching this place? Are you some sort of dangerous villain? Do I look like a villain to you?" Xianxia asked with a smile, but after that the smile suddenly disappeared from his face. "Wait a minute, her surname is Yun. It's not Feng. Besides that, in the illusory demon realm, the Yun family was a guardian family that everyone knew of. But in the profound sky continent, the surname Yun was actually a very rare and seldomly seen surname." The little girl gave Xianxia a very serious stare, but after that her eyebrows suddenly arced as she started laughing. "Wah, uncle, you're really weak, hee hee hee." Unclee. The corner of Xianxia's mouth fiercely twitched upon hearing that. As the #1 pretty boy in the profound sky continent, the illusory demon realm, the Eastern Divine Region, and the Western Divine Region, this was the very first time someone had addressed him so. He immediately displayed an expression that was even more indignant and infuriated than the little girl's, and he nearly gnashed his teeth as he spoke. "Uncle, have you ever seen an uncle as elegant and handsome as me?" As he said those words, he also casually brushed a hand across his cheeks. But what he touched was a whole lot of bristles and exceptionally coarse skin. He was immediately stunned by this. Since he had the rage god's divine art, his body was constantly being nourished by the spiritual energies of the heaven and earth. While every inch of his skin was as tough and durable as heavenly steel, it was also white, flawless, and tender to the touch, and no matter how severe his wounds were, they would not leave a single mark on his skin. So outwardly he had always appeared no more than 20 years of age, and it would be the same even if another 1,000 or 10,000 years passed. But after he was resurrected, he no longer had his profound strength or divine body, and spiritual energy no longer washed over and tempered his body either. Furthermore, the muddy and turbid aura in the lower realms, the mountain winds which blew across his body every day, the weakening of said body, and especially the incomparably heavy knot of emotions in his heart. All of these things caused him to swiftly and unconsciously age. Thus, during this short period of little over a month, it felt as if he had aged more than a decade. Upon hearing Xianxia's words, the little girl's lips parted as she stuck out her tongue at him. "Your words are really shameless. Furthermore, to think that a big man like you is actually so weak, and you even need a woman to support you as you walk, that's even more shameless." If anyone else had said similar words, it would have undoubtedly dealt Xianxia a silent blow. But when he was faced with this little girl's disdain, Xianxia could only shake his head and laugh. "Fine, fine, fine. You're completely correct. I am indeed a very weak and also a very shameless uncle. You see, I am so weak that I definitely don't pose any danger to you, right? So could you let me take a look at what's inside the bamboo forest?" "No way." Just as Xianxia's voice fell, Yun Wuxin's expression changed in an instant, and those starry eyes that had previously grown somewhat gentle had also recovered some of their previous fierceness. She pointed a finger of her white and tender hand at him as she warned him. "This is the territory of my mother and I. No one is allowed to approach it. If not, I'm not gonna play nice anymore. I'm warning you, don't think that you can bully me because I'm still young. I'll have you know that I'm really strong." Big brother benefactor. Feng Xian'er pulled Xianxia along, and if Xianxia still possessed his divine senses, he would have sensed that Feng Xian'er had already released her profound energy and used it to protect him from any oncoming attacks. "It's better if we return. Otherwise, it will get dangerous." Yun-Chi gave a faint smile as he gave the little girl, who was trying to assume a bossy and overbearing stance, a deep look as he voiced his doubt. Surely she can't really be the little monster that you mentioned, right? Feng Xian'er. He did not listen to Feng Xian'er's words as his heart started to throb for no rhyme or reason. Instead, he took the smallest of steps forward as he stepped on the border of the bamboo grove. "You're not allowed to come over here?" It was this one small step that seemed to trod right on that little girl's heart. She let out a shrill yell as her long hair suddenly danced. It was at this moment that the bamboo plants beside her started to sway violently, as if a strong wind had suddenly blown through them. "Ah!" Feng Xian'er let out a startled cry as she hurriedly flashed forward to stand in front of Yun-Chi. It was also this unwitting movement that caused a single foot of hers to step inside the bamboo grove. Yun Wuxin's expression faintly changed. In this instant, her white and tender arm, which still had not fully matured, suddenly thrust forward in what one could call a conditioned reflex. Bzzz. An incomparably deep and muffled explosion rang out in the still and quiet land. Feng Xian'er did not step back at all as all of her profound energy was released in an instant, as she fiercely blocked the attack in front of Yun-Chi. During the deep and muffled explosion, the space around them clearly distorted for a while, and both she and Yun-Chi were instantly blasted backwards as they were pushed out of the bamboo forest. Oof, Yun-Chi's entire body vibrated and he nearly vomited blood. Feng Xian'er had already hugged him to her body in a great fluster. "Are you all right? Did you get injured anywhere?" At this moment, the girl who had reflexively made an attack had now withdrawn her hand in a somewhat rattled manner. As she looked at Yun-Chi, whose face had clearly gone a deathly pale, panic flashed in her eyes. She hurriedly took a few steps forward, then immediately retreated yet again as she spoke in a stammering voice. "Are you all right? I didn't do it on purpose. Who asked you not to listen to me?" Yun-Chi's hand pressed against his chest as a burst of agonizing pain ran through his chest, but he did not pay any attention to that. His eyes were firmly fixed on this little girl, and it was as if he was looking at a monster who should not exist. Just now, there had clearly been a distortion in space, even though the spatial element in the blue pole star could not be compared to the spatial element in the God realm. It was also definitely not so easily distorted. To be able to create such a clear spatial distortion, at the very least, one needed to have cultivated until the Emperor Profound realm. However, this little girl in front of him was only 10 years of age even by the most generous of estimates, yet she actually already possessed a profound strength that was at the Emperor Profound realm. In Blue Wind Nation, a power at the level of the Emperor Profound realm was equivalent to the strength of a grand sect master of the 4 best sects in the realm. The #1 person in Blue Wind all those years ago, Ling Tianyi, was also merely a level 6 throne. Furthermore, in order to protect him, Feng Xian'er, in her desperation, had definitely not dared to hold back anything. Yet even though Feng Xian'er had brought her full power to bear to block that attack, she was still blasted back by the hand that this little girl had thrust out reflexively. That also meant that this little girl's cultivation was actually above that of Feng Xian'er's. She was not only a throne, she was also possibly a mid-stage or even late-stage throne. How old are you this year?" Yun-Chi asked, and he stammered nearly as badly as that little girl as those words spilled from his mouth. 11, the little girl replied in a somewhat flustered manner, but her starry eyes were still vigilant and cautious. Yun-Chi quietly sucked in a breath of cold air. An 11-year-old late-stage throne in the entire profound sky continent, and even the illusory demon realm, such a case had definitely never occurred before, let alone Blue Wind Nation. At this age, the profound veins of the majority of profound practitioners had just formed, and they had just barely managed to stumble into the starting point of the profound way. When he was 11 years old, he was hiding behind Xiao Lai's legs, and he had not even truly understood what the profound way was. But the little lady in front of him could warp space itself with a single palm. Just when did such a little monster appear in the profound sky continent? Little monster. No wonder Feng Xian'er called her a little monster. Just how was she only a little monster? Upon realizing that Yun-Chi was probably all right, the little girl's heart finally managed to relax a little, but her expression became very tense. "Uncle, you're really, really weak. HMPH, now you know how powerful I am, right? If you're afraid now, you should hurry up and go. If not, I really am going to be angry." "Big brother benefactor, let's go," Feng Xian'er said in an urgent voice. The sudden attack of the little girl had left her feeling anxious and afraid. Great waves surged up in Xianxia's heart, but he did not persist any further. Instead, he simply gave a faint nod of his head. As he turned around, he gave that little girl another deep look. For some odd reason, an incomparably intense feeling of not wanting to be parted from her surged up in his heart. Strange, why does my heart beat so wildly whenever I look at her? Could it be that her mental strength is very strong while my mental strength is simply too weak? As she witnessed the two people departing, Xianxia gave a small sigh of relief, and it was only then that her small and delicate figure disappeared into the bamboo forest. In an instant, the bamboo grove swayed, and a light wind started blowing as it carried with it the coldly clear but gentle voice of a woman. "Xian'er, were you cultivating just now?" "No, mother." This time it was the girl's voice that rang out in the air. "There was a strange uncle that wanted to come inside the grove, but I chased him off already." As they had already departed quite some distance from the forest, with his current hearing ability, Xianxia would not have been able to hear the voices of the mother and child. But this gust of cool wind inadvertently blew in the direction that Xianxia had left, causing that billowy celestial voice to ring in his ears. That celestial voice that had been carried along by the wind was as light and faint as mist, but it caused Xianxia to react as if heavenly lightning had suddenly struck his body, and he suddenly froze in place. As the sound on the wind flew into the distance, Xianxia stood there in a daze, and the world seemed to spin and whirl before his very eyes. "Big brother benefactor, what's wrong?" Feng Xian'er hurriedly stopped in her tracks as well. Xianxia stared at the empty air in front of him. His eyes were dazed and disoriented, as if all the blood in his body had completely stopped flowing, going limp and numb. He dazedly stammered out a few words. "Just now, did you hear a voice?" "A voice? No, I didn't." Feng Xian'er shook her head. Besides the soft whistling of the blowing wind, she had not heard any other sound. Xianxia's current hearing ability was more than several levels worse than Feng Xian'er's right now. If even Feng Xian'er had not heard that voice, then it could only be an auditory hallucination. But Xianxia shook his head. He shook his head so hard that he was practically trembling. He turned around, but the weakness that overtook his body made him sink to his knees in the next instant. "Ah, you! What happened to you?" Feng Xian'er hurriedly helped him to his feet, but she was completely bewildered by his actions as well. "No, it's her voice. It's her voice." Xianxia's vision gradually grew more and more blurry as blood chaotically surged and tossed throughout his entire body. Even though it had been more than a decade since they had been separated forever by the heavens, her fairy-like figure and voice would always be deeply engraved into the deepest part of his heart and soul, a place that could never be touched, a place which contained his deepest pain and his guilt. His memories of her would not dim even until the day he died. "Bring me over there! Bring me over there!" Xianxia stretched out a clawed hand in the direction of the bamboo hut, yet the weakness and trembling that had overtaken his entire body made it so that he could hardly stand. All right, let's go over there. We're going over there right now." Feng Xian'er could feel the trembling of Xianxia's body with an incomparable clarity. An abnormal shade of scarlet now stained his skin, and his expression looked so disoriented and messy that it seemed as if his very soul had been punctured. She was completely frightened by this, and she panikedly nodded her head in assent. She could not longer be bothered about warning Xianxia about the dangers of the bamboo grove, as she once again carried him towards that place. At the same time, she circulated profound energy, and used it to protect Xianxia's body in her most careful and meticulous manner. They flew toward the bamboo grove, and as their approaching auras neared the boundary of the forest, they caused the strangely vigilant Xianxia to emerge from the forest with a swoosh. Upon seeing the two people she had just frightened into leaving return, the expression on her small face turned extremely ferocious as she shouted in a voice much louder than before. "Hey, why did you two come back? Leave immediately, if not." She stretched her hand out. "If you really don't leave, then I'm really going to send the two of you flying this time." Xianxia's gaze swiveled wildly as if it wanted to pierce through the layers of bamboo. At this time, a dreamy voice softly rang out from the depths of the bamboo grove. "Xian'er, who are you talking to?" "ZZZZZNN." That fairy-like voice was carried on the wind, as light and diaphanous as mist. In that instant, Xianxia felt as though his soul had exploded all at once. The world in front of him turned pale white, and all the blood in his body crazily rushed to his head. He stood there stock-still. He had completely stopped breathing, unable to even feel his own heartbeat. In fact, he could not even feel the existence of his entire body, as if he had suddenly been plunged into an unreal and fantastical dream. "Ah, Feng Xian'er supported him once more. She felt Xianxi's body completely leaning on her own. His body was trembling and his eyes had lost their light. It was like he had suddenly lost his entire soul. "Little fairy," he muttered as if he was sleep-talking before he went out of control and tried to lunge forward. "Little fairy, is it you? Is it you, little fairy?" The form of address that only he used, the fairy-like figure that he thought he would never be able to see again, the fairy-like figure that was the only thing that could cause him to feel a lifetime of guilt. Xianxi's far too intense reaction and his out-of-control wailing had not only frightened Feng Xian'er, it had also frightened Yun Wuxing. Her eyes widened and her expression grew several degrees more anxious. What's wrong with him? It has nothing to do with me, right?" Feng Xian'er dazedly stared at Xianxi. She was not able to answer that question either. The bamboo grove slightly parted, and a figure slowly emerged from the midst of the bamboo grove. Her footsteps were very light and gentle. It was as if she was stepping on clouds or as if she was walking in a dream, and she still wore those white robes that she loved the most, robes that looked as pure as driven snow, as flawless as pearly jade. Her aura and disposition were still like they were in the past. Her presence seemed to be misty and light, as if she had transcended this mundane world, as if she was a celestial being or a dream, as if she was a bundle of fireworks that had never been stained by the mortal realm. It was just that she had grown a lot thinner and frailer compared to before, and it looked as if she could barely endure the cold wind that blew through the bamboo grove. Just like Xianxi, there was not a single trace of the aura of the profound way emanating from her body. But compared to Xianxi's swiftly aging looks, which were due to the gloom and depression that shrouded his heart and soul, it seemed as if the heavens favored her. Even if all of her profound strength was gone, time and a hard life had not left any marks on her face. She simply stood there quietly, yet all of the brilliant luster between heaven and earth was drawn to her. Chu Yuechen. She looked at Xianxi looked at her, and the instant that their gazes met, it seemed as if the world had suddenly frozen in place. There was no color, no sound, there was only the reflected image of each other in their eyes, an image that was even more illusory than a dream. "Mother!" Yun Wuxin softly cried out. Her small and delicate body turned, and she arrived at her side as a layer of warm and gentle profound energy urgently covered her body. She was only afraid that she would be injured by the cold wind. "The wind is very cold today. You can't come out." She did not respond to her daughter's anxious words. She simply stared at Xianxi in a stupor, all the light in her beautiful eyes turning into a misty haziness. Words spilled out from her lips in such a soft murmur that it seemed like she was talking in her sleep. "Is it you?" Xianxi nodded his head, but he had no strength to nod it any more vigorously. He wanted to step forward, but his body simply refused to listen to any of his instructions. He opened his mouth again and again, and it took a very long time before he spoke in a voice that trembled so much that even he could not hear himself clearly. "Yes, it is I." Chu Yuechen's body lightly swayed in the wind, and not another sound proceeded from her parted lips. The vicissitudes of life had left their mark on the looks of the man in front of her. Loss and despondency were writ large on his face, and those previously bright eyes had now also turned muddy and turbid. But from the very first instant, she had known that it was him. The man that had messed up the strings of her heart had melted all her emotional defenses. The man who had cruelly left her forever after completely seizing body, heart, and soul. Yet another gust of wind blew against her, causing her to slowly collapse in a daze. "Ah, mother, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me." Yun Wuxin hurriedly supported her. She looked at her mother first, then at Xianxi, her heart filled with bewilderment and panic. This gust of cold wind had finally started to rouse Xianxi from his reverie. He stretched out his hand as he slowly walked forward. It was just that he could not feel his own footsteps, and it felt as if his body was being propped up by invisible clouds. Bit by bit, he approached the figure that he thought would only ever appear again in his dreams. Yun Wuxin did not move to block him. Even she did not know why she did not do anything. Even when Xianxi stood right in front of her mother, she still stood there absent-mindedly as she was left at a complete loss. Chu Yuechen slowly extended a hand and she touched Xianxi's face. The rough and coarse feeling of his skin was more real than anything else in the world. "You're still alive." "I'm still alive." Xianxi nodded, and every word seemed as faint and indistinct as a light mist. "You're also still alive." The two people stood facing each other. He had thought he would never see her again, and he would only be left with a lifetime of pain every time he thought of her. She had thought that she would never see him again, and that she would only be left with a lifetime of regret every time she thought of him. Destiny, which always played cruel jokes on people, could also be compassionate every once in a while. It was just that this act of compassion had come nearly 12 years late. He held Chu Yuechen's hand, that gentle sensation spreading from his palm to every corner of his heart and soul, telling him that all of this was not a dream. He was once again holding little Fairy's hand, and he never wanted to let it go again. The amount of wild joy one would experience when finding something again corresponded directly to the amount of heartrending pain they experienced when losing that same thing. They had been forever separated by heaven, for nearly 12 years, and the 1,000 expressions and 10,000 words they wanted to say to each other all returned to silence. The face and figure of the person opposite them were sometimes clear and distinct and sometimes blurry, and the whole world seemed to be continuously revolving between reality and fantasy. "Mother, what's going on with you? Have you fallen ill?" Yun Wuxin asked timidly as she looked at the interlocking hands of Yun Qi and her mother, her small hands lightly grasping the corners of her clothes. Her voice caused Yun Qi to involuntarily swivel. He looked toward Yun Wuxin, and in that moment he was unable to divert his gaze. His already unbearably disordered heart and soul started to shake with even more intensity. Her surname was Yun, 11 years of age. Could it be that she was? Chu Yuechen stretched out her other hand, grasping the girl's small, tender, and delicate hand as she softly said, "Xian'er, he's your daddy." Yun Qi's body violently swayed and his vision had gone completely blurry once more. Behind him, Feng Xian'er held both hands to her lips. Her beautiful eyes were opened wide and she had been shocked silly. Upon looking at her mother and then looking at Yun Qi, Yun Wuxin's lips slightly parted as she said timidly, "But isn't Daddy supposed to be already gone from this world?" Chu Yuechen shook her head, and the glimmering tears in the corners of her eyes were more flawless and sadly beautiful than the most resplendent starlight in the universe. "Mother tricked you. Not only is your daddy alive, he even managed to find us. Xian'er, from now onwards you have a father. Are you happy?" Daddy?" Yun Wuxin's lips remained parted as she stared at Yun Qi dumbly, her eyes so hazy that it seemed as if they were covered by a layer of undispellable watery mist. "Wuxin, my daughter." As he gazed upon this girl who was right in front of him, this girl who was connected to him by blood, the chaos and disorder in Yun Qi's heart had reached its limit. He stretched out a trembling hand to touch Yun Wuxin, his daughter, the continuation of his life. Yun Wuxin did not dodge, but his hand stopped in midair before it was timidly retracted. He did not dare touch her, as if he was afraid that his rough and dirty fingers would sully her flawless and tender face. He was afraid that she would not be willing to accept the most useless father in this world, and he was even more afraid that all of this would suddenly shatter and pop like a bubble. "Are you really my daddy?" A girlish voice rang in his ears. She was looking at him very seriously, and he had never seen such a beautiful pair of eyes in his life. They surpassed all of the beautiful scenery he had seen in his life, surpassed all of the stars in the sky. He nodded his head, but he was too ashamed to admit it. This mother and daughter had been alone for 12 years. He had not witnessed her birth, had not accompanied her as she grew up. He had never done anything for her as her father, not for even a day, a moment, or even a single breath. So how could he be worthy of admitting that fact? "Then," the little girl said in a tremulous and insecure voice, "I was so fierce to Daddy just now, so will Daddy spank my butt because of that." Those soft words caused Yun Qi to feel as if countless threads of warm air had exploded in every corner of his body and soul. His world had turned completely blurry, and his body leaned forward while trembling as he hugged his own daughter. As he tightly hugged her, his tears instantly burst forth like water from a burst dam, drowning out all sound and thought. And in an instant, the little girl's frail and weak-looking shoulder had become completely drenched. "Daddy is actually a crybaby," Yun Wuxin softly muttered to herself as she lay cradled in her father's embrace. And before she knew it, sparkling and translucent tears had also started soundless flowing down on her face. She did not know just how precious her father's tears truly were, because even when he was enduring the pain of his soul leaving his body, even when he struggled between the boundaries of life and death, he had never once shed a single tear. But at this moment, his tears were crazily flooding out like water from a burst dam. "SSSS, cough, cough." He fiercely gritted his teeth as he desperately tried to stop his tears from flooding out, but he was simply unable to stop crying. In fact, he was not even able to say a complete sentence, a single word. "My Yuechen, my daughter, our daughter." He had been spending every single day in a depressing gloom ever since his revival, and he had asked himself time and again why he was still alive. He had even begun to hate and resent the fact that he was alive every now and then. But at this moment, he felt incredibly fortunate and grateful to still be alive. It was truly good to be alive. Ah, yes. In this world, there's nothing better than being alive. The bamboo house was very small, and the decorations inside were extremely simplistic and tidy. However, they also gave off an indescribable sense of calm and warmth. Chu Yuechen had built this delicate little bamboo hut with green bamboo by herself a long time ago, and no one had been allowed to get close to it, much less enter. Yun Qi was the first outsider to break this rule. Right now, Yun Qi's eyes were red and swollen. Without any profound energy, he wasn't able to do even something as simple as reducing the swelling. If his current appearance were to be exposed to the world, the sheer amount of eyeballs that clattered on the floor could probably fill up more than half of the eastern divine region. "How did you arrive at this place back then?" he asked while glancing back and forth between Chu Yuechen and Yun Wuxin from time to time. For the first time, he felt like having just two eyes wasn't enough at all. Yun Wuxin was leaning on Chu Yuechen's knees and holding her cheeks with both arms, examining Yun Qi in secret from time to time. As Chu Yuechen held her tiny hands, her eyes turned a little misty upon hearing Yun Qi's question. She was clearly different from who she was before. Fairy of frozen beauty, head of the frozen cloud 7 fairies. A woman who had been so cold that she could almost be described as heartless so many years ago. Although she still kept her cool temperament to this day, it was clear that her eyes and appearance had softened by a little. No, a lot. It was because she was no longer the fairy of frozen beauty. She was now just a woman who had given up everything in her past for the sake of a dead husband and a girl's mother. Back then, everyone thought that you had died at Heavenly Sword Villa's sword management terrace. It was also around that time that I realized I was pregnant, so in order to keep your bloodline alive, I chose to leave frozen Cloud Asgard. Yun Qi knew full well that her departure hadn't been a simple thing. She had had to abolish her own frozen cloud arts, bear the shame and guilt of having let down her sect on her own, and even have her decision exposed as the biggest scandal to happen in Blue Wind Nation back then. Thankfully, Yun Qi later grew powerful enough both physically and politically to strong-arm the scandal into a romantic affair. When power reached a certain level, it transforms not just the wielder, but also everyone's recognition. I was hoping to find a quiet place to give birth to our child, but I was ambushed before I'd even left the snow region of extreme ice. Those people were extremely powerful, and I had just abolished my own profound arts and destabilized my own profound aura not long ago. As a result, I was wounded during the attack. Luckily for me, a timely snowstorm shielded me from detection and gave me the opportunity to escape on the Snow Phoenix. "It was Xuanyuan Yufeng," Yun Qi said calmly, but his hands were clenched very tightly. He hadn't taken Xuanyuan Yufeng's life because of Ling Jai, but he couldn't help but be filled with hatred every time he thought of her anyway. In fact, his hatred had only grown stronger after listening to Chu Yuechen's story. I realized that they were from Heavenly Sword Villa. Chu Yuechen might have abolished her own profound art back then, but she still possessed the power at the Emperor Profound realm. There were only a handful of powers that could have driven her to the grave situation she was in the entire Blue Wind Nation. But Heavenly Sword Villa was definitely among those powers. After I had escaped the snow region, I fainted for a long time inside a wild forest. It was only after I woke up that I realized that I wasn't the only one who was hurt. My child had taken damage during the ambush as well. "What?" Yun Qi shook violently upon hearing this. His eyes had become countless times murkier than before, but that didn't stop them from burning suddenly with terrible violence. "They hurt Wuxin?" Yun Wuxin blinked and shot Yun Qi a puzzled glance. Back then, all I could do was to protect Wuxin with whatever profound energy I had left, but I also had no idea where I should go from there. Her voice sounded transient when she was recalling her situation back then. Holding tightly onto Chu Yuechen's hands, Yun Qi felt a painful cramp twitching inside his heart. She had deserted her sect, bore shame on her back, and then been hunted by Heavenly Sword Villa before she had even left the snow region. What power had Heavenly Sword Villa been back then? They had been the #1 force in Blue Wind Nation and an absolutely invincible existence. The level of despair she must have faced back in those years must have been unimaginable. "Do you remember?" Chu Yuechen's voice suddenly turned much gentler. Back at the Dragon God's trial grounds, you told me a lot of stories in order to keep me awake after I had lost all my profound veins and became filled with the will to die. Most of them were clearly fake, but I had thought that some might actually turn out to be true. It was as she said. Back at the Dragon God's trial grounds, more than 90% of the stories he had told Chu Yuechen were fake. They were jokes he forced himself to speak to make her laugh, even though he hadn't succeeded even once. At the time, I vaguely remembered you telling me that your phoenix flames didn't come from the divine phoenix sect, but a place called the 10,000 Beasts mountain range. You had said that a decayed, lost phoenix clan had lived there, and that its descendants were extraordinarily kind and guileless. Even better, they were protected by the phoenix god itself, and no beast dared to enter its territory. In order to keep Chu Yuechen from losing heart, he had said many, many things to her for half a year straight. He literally couldn't remember everything that he had told her, which was why he couldn't remember ever telling her about the Phoenix clan. In fact, he was a little surprised by this revelation. It was true that Chu Yuechen was the first person to learn that he possessed the Phoenix flames. On the first day they came to know each other, he had used the Phoenix flames to force out the poison spirit lurking inside her body. However, the Phoenix flame's origin wasn't only one of the greatest secrets he had to hide, but also a matter that related to the safety of the Phoenix clan. It wasn't something that he had planned to tell any outsiders about. However, Yun Qi gradually came to accept his slip-up, after he recalled the situation back at the Dragon God's trial grounds. He had to kill 99,999 profound beasts in a cruel trial, and he had to stay alert throughout the whole thing to defend both him and Chu Yuechen from dangers that could come from anywhere, anytime. He could accept that he was so mentally fatigued that he had revealed a secret he shouldn't have and not realized it throughout the years until just now. That was how I came to be here. However, when I first arrived at this place, I discovered a barrier that was so powerful that it was impossible to break through, even before I had abolished my own profound arts. Chu Yuechen said quietly. Chu Yuechen was undoubtedly speaking of the protective barrier the Phoenix spirit had created with its final strength, after he and Kang Yue had left the mountain range back then. Disappointed, I was about to leave to search for another way, but suddenly a hole appeared on the barrier on its own. It was Wuxin. Yun Qi couldn't help himself. She inherited my Phoenix bloodline, and my bloodline came from the Phoenix spirit's origin blood itself, which makes Wuxin the second-generation successor of the Phoenix's origin blood. That's why her Phoenix aura was stronger than an adult Phoenix descendant's even before she was born. No one could have affected the Phoenix barrier before they were born unless they were Yun Qi or Feng Xian'er, people who had inherited the origin blood of a Phoenix directly. Not even the direct descendants of the Phoenix clan or the divine Phoenix sect. But Wuxin could, because she was his daughter. Back then, Chu Yuechen was hunted by Heavenly Sword Villa right after she had abolished her profound arts, getting injured as a result. Worse, the divine Phoenix sect started invading Blue Wind Nation not long after. If the unborn Yun Wuxin hadn't unconsciously opened the Phoenix barrier for Chu Yuechen, he might not have seen either of them ever again in his life. This place is exactly what you told me before. It is a peaceful land that is hidden from the world. Their eyes hold no malice in them, and despite the initial surprise and wariness they held when they first saw me, they tried to help me after they learned that I was carrying a baby. They didn't try to disturb me after I showed them cool rejection either. Chu Yuechen closed her eyes softly. Since then, I spent almost all of my time inside this bamboo forest. I've not even interacted with them for the past few years because I was afraid of putting my trust in anyone anymore, and of course, leaving was out of the question. I understand. Yun Qi nodded while replying feebly. The loving ache in his heart and his regret were so big that he felt like his innards were being carved alive. Your profound energy is gone, right? Yun Qi asked softly. He might not have his spiritual perception any longer, but it was visibly evident even to his eyes. Chu Yuechen nodded, but there wasn't any sorrow or desolation to be seen on her face. She said calmly, Wuxin had been hurt by a sword aura while she was still in my belly. When I finally arrived here, her aura had become barely noticeable. To keep her alive, I had to force out my blood essence and origin power continuously. Yun Qi shook once again, and his face turned visibly pale. In the end, I used up all of my origin power, and my profound veins wilted away. However, I ultimately managed to save Wuxin and give birth to her. Even Yun Qi's lips were shaking at this point. She had lost most of her blood essence, and her profound veins had wilted away. Then she had to give birth to Wuxin. To his knowledge, she shouldn't have survived the experience no matter what. He wanted to ask how Chu Yuechen had managed to overcome this ordeal, but the answer came to him before he managed to ask the question. It was a miracle only a mother could achieve. At the time, I had wanted to entrust Wuxin to them and fall asleep in peace, but I just couldn't let go while staring at her eyes and listening to her cries. Chu Yuechen stroked her daughter's hair gently while looking at her with eyes gentle and warm enough to melt anything. I wanted to watch her grow. I had hoped that she would look like you. I look more like mother, though. In fact, I don't look like father at all. Yun Wuxin stared at Chu Yuechen before sticking her tongue out slightly at Yun Qi. Chu Yuechen's smile became captured in Yun Qi's heart and soul in that instant. This was the first time he had ever seen her smile. In the past, this was something that he had only seen in his dreams, but now it was happening right before his eyes. The only reason he could witness this now was because he was still alive. Back then, he had used countless methods to seek out Chu Yuechen. He had asked Kang Yue to organize a search using the royal family's power. He had asked the Black Moon Merchant Guild to help him. And he had even asked Feng Xian'er to organize a search throughout the profound sky continent using the divine phoenix sect's power later on. But his attempts had all ended in failure. It was because he had never thought to search the Phoenix clan. The Phoenix clan lived in a peaceful land that wasn't known to the outside world. It was a secret place. Since his Phoenix powers had originated from here, he had reason not to reveal it to the outside world. That was why he had subconsciously avoided them during his many search attempts, and why the thought that Chu Yuechen might have come here never entered his mind. 5 years ago, he and Feng Xian'er had come to visit the Phoenix clan, but they had ultimately decided against disturbing their peace after discovering the Phoenix barrier. He hadn't realized that they were so close to him until now. Yun Qi finally understood why even Jasmine hadn't been able to find Chu Yuechen. After Jasmine had remade her body and regained some of her powers, she had spread out her spiritual perception twice and tried to search for Chu Yuechen's aura throughout the entire profound sky continent. Both times she had told him that her lack of strength was the reason she failed. It was only after she had left that he learned the truth from the soul message she had left behind with Xian'er. It wasn't that she lacked the power to find Chu Yuechen, it was because she couldn't find her anywhere. After Chu Yuechen had abolished her frozen cloud arts, her aura no longer had the signature of a frozen cloud Asgard profound practitioner. That was why Jasmine had no choice but to search through every Emperor Profound Realm profound practitioner that existed on the profound sky continent. Later on, she assumed that Chu Yuechen might have achieved a breakthrough and changed targets to Tyrant Profound Realm profound practitioners, and even Sovereign Profound Realm profound practitioners. However, her efforts had still ended in failure. Jasmine had even considered the possibility that Chu Yuechen's profound energy might have declined and tried searching for her among those in the sky profound realm. The results were still the same. There were over 100 billion of living beings that exists on the profound sky continent. No matter how powerful Jasmine was, there was no way she could have scanned everyone in detail, especially considering that a person's aura grew weaker the lower their profound energy was. That was how the cruel truth in Jasmine's message came to be. Emperor Profound Realm, Tyrant Profound Realm, Sovereign Profound Realm, and even Sky Profound Realm. Chu Yuechen was none of them. This meant that there were only 2 possible outcomes left. Chu Yuechen was either dead or crippled. If it was the latter, considering Chu Yuechen's beauty, her downfall would only be even more tragic, and considering her character, she would rather die than suffer the humiliation. That was the exact moment Yun Qi was forced to accept the fact that Chu Yuechen truly had passed away. Of course, that had all changed today. From her story, he learned that Chu Yuechen had lost her profound strength, but it wasn't because she was crippled by her enemies. It was because she had willingly used up all of her origin power and allowed her profound veins to wilt away to protect Yun Wuxin. Xun Yuan Yufeng. Yun Qi gritted his teeth in secret. You might be Ling Jai's birth mother, but I really should cut you into 1,000,000 pieces all the same. Qi said dispiritedly and absently. The only thing he could say were these incomparably shallow and pale words. It wasn't bitter at all. Chu Yuechen shook her head. From when I was still in frozen cloud Asgard, I had already become accustomed to this kind of peace and quiet. What's more, I also had Wuxin by my side. Then have you ever thought of leaving this place someday? Yun Qi asked. Chu Yuechen still shook her head, but when she looked at her daughter, complex feelings faintly appeared in her eyes. Xian'er is growing bigger by the day, and I can't keep her by my side forever. She has to go out to the outside world eventually and find the life that belongs to her. But her growth is simply too fast, so fast that it left me terrified. Yunqi, when she was 6, her body would naturally produce profound energy. As a result, I tried to guide her cultivation, and the result was that her profound strength grew at a terrifying speed. In a month, she reached the nascent profound realm. In 3 months, she entered the true profound realm. In 6 months, she broke into the spirit profound realm. By the time she was 7.5, she had already reached the earth profound realm, and at 8.5, she had reached the sky profound realm. Finally, before she reached her 10th year, she had already become a throne as of today. She is already at the 9th level of the Emperor Profound Realm, surpassing the founding ancestor of Frozen Cloud Asgard. Furthermore, every time she stepped into a new realm, there were no signs of her having to break any bottleneck. Even though Yunqi had already seen Yun Wuxin in action, his heart still violently shook upon hearing those words. Moreover, if the words that Chu Yuechen had just said entered the ears of the profound practitioners of the profound sky continent, they would definitely feel as if every single word had been spun out of fantasy. Without the shadow of a doubt, Yun Wuxin's speed of growth in the profound way was absolutely not normal. This situation, conversely, caused me even more worry, and I did not dare let her leave this place. Chu Yuechen's worries were absolutely normal and understandable. She did not know what the outside world had become. But she did not doubt in the least that the appearance of a throne who was only 11 years of age, and a late-stage throne at that, would definitely cause tremors that would immensely shake the entire profound world. Since she was alone and unaffiliated with anybody, her life would definitely be a troubled one. As if I want to go to the outside world, mother. I want to accompany mom always, Yun Wuxin said cheerily as she snuggled against her mother. Daddy, are you also going to accompany us from now on? Yunqi gave a faint smile, but he did not say anything. Because he could see that when Yun Wuxin said these things, there was a light of yearning and longing in the depths of her eyes. She wanted to leave this place. She wanted to see the world outside, but even more than all of these things, she did not want to leave her mother all alone. How about you? Chu Yuechen asked. How did you end up surviving all those years ago, and why did you? The young man who had been so young and immature yet still shone with a light that was even more dazzling than the sun. When she finally saw him again, he had become so despondent and gloomy. Yunqi faintly raised his head, and his mind went back to the starting point of his life. As he quietly thought of everything, his heart suddenly became calm at this moment. During the half-year we spent in the Dragon God trial grounds, I spent every day saying countless things to you, telling countless stories to you, but I never told you who I truly was and where I had truly come from. In fact, I told you many lies, many vain boasts, and many jokes, Chu Yuechen. And who would have thought that in the 12 years before I found you again, I would go through so many things? Most of them would sound absolutely fantastical and absurd if you heard them. But I won't deceive you again like I did all those years ago. This time, every single word I am about to say will be the unvarnished truth. He did not start his tale from the calamity that had struck him in Heavenly Sword Villa all those years ago. Instead, he started from the point where his fate started to turn. He started from the point where he reincarnated back to the profound sky continent from the azure cloud continent. He recounted his fated reincarnation, his meeting with Jasmine, and how he found out about his actual identity and origins underneath the sword management terrace. He talked about his journey to the illusory demon realm, and he also talked about how he destroyed Xuanyuan Wenshin and saved the world. He recounted the drastic changes that happened to Frozen Cloud Asgard, and also told them about how he reached the God Realm, a place that was practically considered a myth and legend in the profound sky continent. He recounted his tale until the point where he had died in the Star God Realm slightly more than a month ago, before he came back to life in a most fantastical manner. The sun had already almost set, and stars filled the sky. All of his experiences, all of his sorrows and joys, all of his secrets, he spoke about them all without reservation. To the Yuechen and Wuxin he had found after they had been lost, he hated that he could not give his whole world to them as recompense, so he did not hide anything from them nor did he hold anything back. This was also the first time in his life that he had so openly and uninhibitedly shared whatever was on his mind. Before he knew it, the stars had gone dim and the sun had started to rise in the east. Outside the bamboo forest, Feng Xian'er had not gone to disturb the reunion of this family, but she had not left either. Instead, she quietly stood there guarding that place. Yun Wuxin had already fallen asleep at some point of time in Chu Yuechen's embrace. She slept soundly and securely, the corners of her lips hooked up in a shallow smile that was nearly imperceptible. She had not known that her own father was such a legend in this entire continent, and she also had not known what sort of power she had really possessed. As he looked at her peaceful face, the corner of Yun Qi's mouth unwittingly hooked up. He was unable to describe just what he was feeling at this moment, but the gloom that had shrouded him during this period of time, the deep abyss that his heart and mind had fallen into, an abyss he had perhaps thought would be hard to truly escape for his entire life, was actually so insignificant and weak in front of her smiling face. In fact, it had practically vanished without a trace. He recalled the gaze which his mother always directed towards him, a gaze filled with a desire to love and pamper, a gaze that was so warm and gentle it could melt every and all things. He finally understood that feeling, and he also understood the guilt she had endured for more than 20 years. No wonder Xin'er's growth has been so startling, Chu Yuechen said in a soft voice as she tightly hugged the daughter sleeping in her arms. Even though she no longer possessed any profound strength, to Yun Wuxin, she had always been the warmest and greatest pillar of support in the world. As it turns out, she actually has a father who seemingly walked out of myth and legend. Well, it's too bad that her father's legend has already ended, Yun Qi said with a faint smile, and when he said those words, his heart, amazingly enough, did not feel even the slightest bit of loss. He had a faint inkling that Yun Wuxin's abnormal talent and aptitude probably had something to do with him. But it was not only because she had inherited his phoenix bloodline and his dragon god bloodline. The abnormality of her profound veins was very likely also due to some influence from his evil god's profound veins. Even though he had lost all of his power, he was able to give his daughter an impressive and enviable natural aptitude. And as a result, the satisfaction in his heart surpassed everything else. Chu Yuechen extended a hand and lightly brushed away some of the dirt on his forehead. You haven't been willing to leave this place despite staying here for so long. Is it because you don't know how to face the rest of them? He had become so aged and despondent in such a short period of time, so one could well imagine what kind of abyss his heart and soul had fallen into. Moreover, she had already been through the kind of abyss he had fallen into, so she understood what sort of despair he was going through. When she had exploded her own profound veins all those years ago, she only had death on her mind. It was Yun Qi who had pulled her back from the depths of the abyss, and after that he had somehow miraculously saved her. Yun Qi closed his eyes before giving a light nod of his head. Chu Yuechen softly said, "Even though you dove through so many stormy waves and have seen countless worlds that others would not even be able to imagine, your nature remains completely unchanged. You've always been accustomed to protecting others. In fact, one could even call your drive to protect others overbearing. You always become other people's pillar of support, yet you are unwilling to accept support from others. This is especially true to the people who are important to you. You are unable to accept that you have become a burden to them." Yun Qi. Thinking back to what happened all those years ago, I had been pushed into a desperate situation by those two flood dragons, and in order to kill them, I had no choice but to detonate my own profound veins and become a cripple. When she mentioned this event, her voice was calm and gentle. At that time, I was unable to accept that I had become a cripple, and I only wanted to die in order to end it all. Do you still remember how you dragged me out of that quagmire, pulled me away from my desire to die? Yun Qi's lips moved slightly. In order to protect me, and even more to prove your determination to me, you carried me along with you as you entered the Dragon God trial grounds. As such, not only did the trial get more difficult, you also had to devote some attention to protecting me. At that time, did you blame me for being a burden to you? She asked. It was also during that period of time that he had protected her so devotedly that it had melted all of the solid ice in her heart, and her desire to live had also been reignited because of him, to the point where even after he had died, she was willing to betray and leave her own sect in order to preserve his bloodline. She had never once regretted or resented that decision. Yun Qi shook his head with no hesitation at all. How could I? How could you ever be a burden to me? Then, did you enjoy the feeling of protecting me and being relied upon by me? She asked him yet again. Once again, Yun Qi nodded his head without the slightest bit of hesitation. Since that is the case, then why are you not willing to rely on them? Chu Yuechen said with a faint smile. Your parents and your family, your friends, your wives, all of them love you, and they don't love you because you are strong. They don't love you because they can rely upon you. They love you because of who you are, and they will continue to love you because you're living a safe and happy life together with them. To be able to rely on you is naturally a sort of happiness. But if they were able to be relied upon by you, if they could use their own strength to protect you, then to all of the people who love you, how could that also not be a form of happiness? Just as how you protected them, just as how they relied upon you. Yun-Chi was stunned by those words, and it seemed as if something had soundlessly melted in his heart. He shook his head and gave a soft laugh. I really am a completely foolish person, to think that I could not even understand such a plain and obvious thing. Actually, if it was yesterday, and it was someone else who had said the exact same things that Chu Yuechen had said, his heart would still not have been able to escape the gloom that enshrouded it. Chu Yuechen's words had only brushed aside the last barrier in his heart. What had truly changed was Yun-Chi's own mindset. There's also one more thing I have to say. The words that you told me all those years ago, I still clearly remember them to this day, and I have not forgotten a single word of them. Chu Yuechen softly said as she looked at Yun-Chi. No matter what I've lost, as long as I do not lose my life, as long as I am still alive, then I will definitely be able to recover the hope that I have lost. Being alive is the greatest hope of all. Being alive means that everything is still possible. Yun-Chi's gaze went rigid. Those were the words that he had roared to Chu Yuechen all those years ago when she had detonated her own profound veins and became filled with the desire to die. He tightly grasped Chu Yuechen's hand and smiled. Even though he had clearly cried all of his tears dry, for some odd reason, the rims of his eyes had grown wet once again. He understood the meaning behind Chu Yuechen's words. Not only had she wanted to wipe away all of the dark haze inside his heart, she also wanted him to cling to hope. Little fairy, he softly called out, don't you worry, I will continue to live well. Because I have you, I have Wuxin. I have a father and mother who regard me more dearly than their own lives. My wife is the Blue Wind Empress. My fiancé is the #1 goddess in the continent. I have so many people who love me. So what reason do I have to not have a happier life than anyone else? Even if I no longer have profound strength for the rest of my life, I need to strive to live for a very long time. 100 years, 1,000 years, I will accompany Wuxin as she grows up. I will pay back everything I owe to both of you, mother and daughter, thousands of times over. The hands which were holding Chu Yuechen's hand tightened bit by bit, and this time he would never let this hand go. Fine. As she gazed at his eyes, Chu Yuechen's eyes also grew misty. Remember what you just said. If you forget, I will repeat it to you word for word. Her voice suddenly stopped, and her face grew extremely pale after that. Yun-Chi suddenly felt a weird feeling wash over him. Little fairy, what's wrong with PFFFFT? A scarlet jet of blood sprayed across Yun-Chi's body, and it was as if millions of scarlet steel needles had been stabbed into Yun-Chi's eyes, heart, and soul. Yuechen's embrace and onto her feet in a jiffy. Without saying a single word, her small hand swiftly stretched out and pressed against her mother's chest. An extremely gentle current of profound energy wrapped around Chu Yuechen's life vein, while it also strove to suppress her agitated energy and blood. She became extremely focused, but she had been so startled that her face had turned pale. Mom, it will soon be just fine. The warm blood that had sprayed on Yun-Chi's hand contained faint traces of an abnormal cold intent. Amidst his horror and astonishment, Yun-Chi's body violently tottered forward as he knelt to the ground. He could not stand up in time, so he swiftly grasped Chu Yuechen's arm. He gritted his teeth as he tried extremely hard to calm himself down, but his hands still shook uncontrollably. Chu Yuechen's complexion was a sickly white, but her expression was far calmer than his own. She gently wiped the corner of her mouth as she said, Don't worry, this is something that happens every now and then. I'm already fine. Yun-Chi did not say anything, and the fingers which grasped Chu Yuechen's arm tightened and relaxed at varying intervals. Even though he had lost all of his profound strength, at the very least, he still had his excellent medical skills and his intimate knowledge of the human body. Her blood and energy were extremely weak and also extremely cold. He quickly figured out the situation. Chu Yuechen had cultivated an ice-based profound art her entire life, so cold energy filled her body. Even though she had destroyed her own profound art, the cold energy that had accumulated in her body for decades would not disperse in such a short amount of time. But given her profound strength that was at the level of the Emperor Profound Realm at that time, this cold energy would not harm her, and if she simply guided it slightly, it would disperse before too long. At that time, however, Chu Yuechen had been severely injured by others when she was pregnant, and she had used all of her power to protect the still unborn Yun Wuxin, to the point where her profound veins had withered and died. And then she still had to go through the birth of Yun Wuxin. As a result, she had lost all of her profound strength, and her body had been weakened to an extreme degree. The cold energy in her body would undoubtedly become a dreadful curse that would chip away at her life. The good thing was that even though Chu Yuechen did not have her profound strength any longer, there were still some traces of his dragon god aura inside of her, which allowed her to endure this condition for many years. But even if that was the case, his gaze shifted slightly as he looked at the little hand Yun Wuxin was pressing against Chu Yuechen's chest. At this juncture, he was extremely convinced that if it was not for the fact that Yun Wuxin had acquired profound strength at such a young age and had grown at such an abnormal speed, Chu Yuechen would definitely have long ago. He let go of Chu Yuechen's arm as he gave a small sigh of relief in his heart. After that, he felt both elation and a lingering fear. His elation stemmed from the fact that the situation was not unsalvageable, and the lingering fear stemmed from the fact that he would have found a lonely and pitiful Yun Wuxin if he had found mother and child a few years later. Chu Yuechen's complexion finally grew better, and it was only then that Yun Wuxin very carefully withdrew her hand. After that, she said in an anxious voice, "Mom, are you feeling any better? Does it still hurt anywhere?" Chu Yuechen shook her head as she softly brushed her daughter's long hair, her beautiful eyes filled with warmth and a reluctance to part. She was most clear on what state her own body was in. She knew that she did not have much time left, and she was already extremely grateful that the heavens were merciful enough to allow her to accompany Wuxin until she was 11 and meet Yun Qi again. The only thing left was a great reluctance to be separated from them. She did not feel any resentment or sorrow. "Wuxin, don't worry, your mother will be fine," Yun Qi said. Those words caused Yun Wuxin to immediately turn her face towards him. Chu Yuechen also lifted her beautiful eyes as she stared at him in astonishment. "Daddy, is what you're saying true?" the girl softly asked, her eyes filled with glimmering tears that had not fallen only because she had sought to hold them back. "Of course," Yun Qi said with a faint smile. "Didn't your mother ever tell you that your father is a genius doctor?" "Genius doctor," Yun Wuxin softly chanted, and he did not know whether it was because she found it hard to believe or if she was stunned by those two words. "Is there really a way?" Chu Yuechen's beautiful eyes flashed with hope. Yun Qi nodded his head as he stared at both mother and daughter calmly. "You possess the dragon god power that came from me, so even if you don't have any profound strength anymore, the cold energy inside your body won't destroy your vitality so easily. I have a method to allow you to completely recover, and even if I am not able to, there is still Linger and my master in the medical arts. My master is the greatest medical practitioner in the world, and he is the only one worthy of the title medical saint. Right now, he's in the illusory demon realm, and as long as he is around, not only will he be able to restore you back to perfect health, he will even be able to completely restore your withered and dead profound veins." He was not exaggerating in the slightest when he said those words, because these were not words meant to comfort or console. Given Yun Gu's ability, he was definitely able to do it. The little demon empress condition at that time was 100 times worse than Chu Yuechen's current condition, and it had rendered him completely helpless. But Yun Gu had only said a few words, and with the help of Su Linger, he had rescued the little demon empress from the condition that was threatening her life. It was simply a pity that he could no longer use the sky poison pearl. Otherwise, he could retrieve a drop of spiritual nectar that had been given to him by Shenzai. Not only would that allow Chu Yuechen to completely recover in a short amount of time, it would also allow her profound strength to directly enter the divine way. After all, this was a divine item that would cause even the king realms to water at the mouth. A divine item that realm kings of normal star realms did not have the qualifications to even sniff at, much less the rest of the profound practitioners in those realms. Yet Shenzai had given several 100,000 years worth of this resource to him. Upon hearing Yun Qi's words, Yun Wuxin's starry eyes flashed, and the tears that she had held back finally started to drip to the ground like raindrops. "Is it really true? Is it really true?" "A father won't trick his daughter," Yun Qi lightly rubbed her head. "Your daddy is indeed a genius doctor, and it was because of this that your mother and father even met in the first place," Chu Yuechen softly said. "All those years ago, he had been able to sense the cold poison in her body with a single distant glance. It was just that she had never imagined that the brief instant where they had brushed shoulders with each other would completely change her entire life. Since he said those words, it's definitely true. Mother will get better and will always accompany, Wuxin. To Yun Wuxin, the words that rang in her ears were undoubtedly the most beautiful sound in the world. It was so beautiful that she found that she did not dare to believe it for a moment. It was just as if she was in a dream. Yun Qi gave a faint smile, but he felt a fierce stabbing pain in his heart. She was only 11 years old, but for all these years, she had undoubtedly been quietly enduring the pressure and pain of possibly losing her own mother at any moment. For a girl as small as Yun Wuxin, that was an indescribable cruelty. As such, she had very carefully and meticulously barred anyone from taking a single step into this bamboo grove, because she was not willing to let anyone harm even a single hair on her mother's head. Of course she will. Yun Qi looked at her eyes before vigorously nodding his head. Your mother will always be by your side, even if it's thousands of years later or tens of thousands of years later, she won't leave you. Then Daddy will also always be with us, right? Her voice had grown even more muffled, and Yun Qi's figure was reflected in her misty eyes, along with an incomparably billowy and dazzling light. Daughters had always idolized their fathers. They did not need a reason to do so, it was a sort of natural tendency. In a daughter's heart, the small spots of light that radiated from their fathers would be enlarged by several times, and sometimes even by 10 or 100 times. Even if the father in front of her would only be an eternal cripple, he had already become as tall as a mountain in her heart right now. Of course I will. He nodded his head once again, even though. He held up Chu Yuechen and Yun Wuxin's hands while he looked into the distance, his heart no longer containing any dark haze or hesitation. Yuechen, Wuxin, leave this place with me. The world outside is no longer dangerous anymore. It is filled with family members and people who would protect us. Master and Linger will help you completely recover. Zuer and Kei will make sure that Wuxin will grow properly. Let's bring Wuxin home so she can recognize her ancestors and her family. Her grandfather and grandmother will definitely be overjoyed. When my mother found out about your situation all those years ago, she wept as she implored me to find you at all costs. Even though it has been late by so many years, I can finally allow her to put down that heavy burden in her heart. The outside world. Grandfather, grandmother. The light in Yun Wuxin's solemn eyes grew even more dazzling. But after that, she quietly hid it away as she turned her head to look at her mother. All right. Without any hesitation at all, Chu Yuechen gave a light nod of her head, which also caused the brightest light to shine in Yun Wuxin's starry eyes. The Phoenix ruins within the trial grounds. The scarlet eyes of the Phoenix slowly opened in the black world in front of him. Yun Qi had once again come to this place, and upon seeing those eyes, he solemnly and respectfully bowed to them. Phoenix Spirit, I thank you for giving me my second life. It is just that Yun Qi is currently only an ordinary mortal. I don't know how I can repay you, and the only thing I can do is to carve this into my memory. Those scarlet eyes froze on his body in an instant, and after that, the voice of the Phoenix reverberated in this dark space. Your mindset and the state of your heart have already changed. It looks like you've already found them. Yun Qi lifted his head and said in a somewhat helpless fashion, As expected, you knew long ago that she was my daughter. She did not only inherit a pure and unadulterated Phoenix aura from your origin blood, her body also contained the Dragon God's aura and a faint and weak evil God aura. The only possibility was that she was one of your progeny, the Phoenix Spirit said. Why didn't you tell me that from the very beginning? Yun Qi asked, even though he had more or less thought of the answer. To fall from the highest of mountaintops into a deep abyss, this heavy and cruel blow is also something that will temper and steel your heart and mind. The heavier the gloom that wreathed your heart and mind previously, the more dazzlingly bright it would have been to you once you found them. In fact, if it was possible, I would have hoped that this process would have continued for an even longer period of time. Yun Qi shook his head as he gave a bitter laugh. If it went on for any longer, I'm afraid I would have been on the brink of collapse. Today, I've come to bid farewell to you. Yun Qi's tone grew more solemn as he said this. Even though my life has been a short one, I have been greatly favored by the Phoenix. Even though I will never again be able to ignite the Phoenix flames in this life, Wuxin has inherited my Phoenix bloodline. In the future, her body will definitely burn with a Phoenix flame even more dazzling than my own. Heh heh. The Phoenix Spirit gave a light chuckle. It was just that compared to the warm and mighty laugh that it had let out all those years ago. The bland laugh that it had just let out was filled with a deep frailty. My time is also about done, so I'm afraid that I won't be able to wait till that day. However, its voice stopped for a brief moment before it continued in an incomparably slow and gentle fashion. Are you truly content to return to an ordinary life? Xianxi's gaze went rigid, and it was a full 10 breaths later that he finally spoke with a faint smile on his face. I will find hope, but even if I really can't find it, it will be fine as well, because I have many things which are far more important than power by my side. At this moment, the phoenix spirit suddenly lapsed into silence, but the light from its scarlet eyes continued to faintly flicker. It was as if it was pondering something. This heavy silence continued for a very long time. It was just when Xianxia was about to open his mouth that the voice of the phoenix spirit suddenly rang in the air. There is a method that might perhaps be able to awaken your power once more. Those words caused Xianxi's heart to stop in that instant. After that, his face, a face which had been completely calm and tranquil as he had said, "It will be fine as well," started to tremble uncontrollably, and it was trembling rather intensely at that as he said, "You, is what you're saying true? What method, what method?" Yes, it was true that he had accepted his present condition. But was he content? How could he be content? I previously told you that the only thing that had been rebirthed by the flames of nirvana was basically just your life, and all of the power that you had previously possessed had died. In other words, they are all still within your body. It is just that they died together with you, but they did not revive together with you. What exactly is the method? Xianxia directly yelled in a low voice as he itched to know. Hurry up and tell me, no matter how hard it is, I will definitely think of a way to do it. It isn't hard. On the contrary, one could say that it is incredibly easy. It's just that to you, this would be an extremely cruel choice. The words of the phoenix spirit caused bewilderment to fill Xianxi's face. He very clearly remembered the phoenix spirit telling him before this that there was no power in this universe that could awaken the dead evil god power, unless one could find another drop of the evil god's indestructible blood, yet right now, it said it could be accomplished easily. Evil god profound veins were created from a drop of the evil god's indestructible blood, and it was the blood that contained the last of his core origin power. That was why the evil god profound veins were able to take form inside your body. Moreover, a second drop of evil god's indestructible blood doesn't exist in this world. In other words, there will never be a second evil god profound veins. On the other hand, you still have the evil god profound veins. The problem here is that it is dead, or has gone completely still if I were to describe it better. If there is one thing in the world that can reawaken your stilled evil god profound veins, then it would be the evil god's origin power. Xianxia had been listening to Phoenix Spirit's every word carefully, but its final line caused his brows to furrow all of a sudden. You can't mean? I'm sure you've noticed it already. The Phoenix Spirit continued. Your daughter hasn't acquired any resources from this mediocre plane, and she definitely hasn't experienced any extraordinary encounters or luck of the profound way in her life. However, her profound energy has continued to grow at an unconventional rate, until she reached a level where countless profound practitioners on this plane dare not even dream to reach in their whole lives. Her growth definitely isn't something that the Phoenix's bloodline and the Dragon God's bloodline alone can achieve. Therefore, the main reason she was able to grow at such a rate is because her profound veins have inherited the evil god's divine aura from you. Xianxia, the only thing that could awaken the evil god's profound veins was the living, fresh presence of the evil god's divine aura. Not only that, the evil god divine aura existing in your daughter's profound veins may be the very last of its kind, and your last chance to reawaken the evil god profound veins inside your body. Xianxia didn't say anything. He didn't try to question the Phoenix Spirit more about the method either. In fact, his barely restrained excitement from earlier had completely vanished. In short, there is a chance that your dead evil god profound veins would awaken if I were to extract the evil god divine aura residing inside your daughter's profound veins and transfer it over to yours. From what I know of the evil god's divine power, the chances that this operation would succeed are around 20%, if not higher. Right now, Xianxi's evil god profound veins were like an extinct volcano. The evil god divine aura residing in Yun Wuxin's profound veins was his only chance to reignite their flames. The evil god's divine power wasn't the only divine power you possess. To others, it would be a godsend if they managed to preserve even one of the many divine powers you were gifted. However, you were able to coexist with your divine powers perfectly, weren't you? I'm sure that you have guessed by now that the evil god's divine power was, probably, the reason why you were able to wield them all. The evil god's divine power is the highest power you possess. If it can be resurrected successfully, the rest of your divine powers may awaken on their own and return you to your former height. The Phoenix Spirit's assessment was correct. The evil god's divine power was undoubtedly the most vital and highest of powers that Xianxia currently possessed, and the chances that the rest of his divine powers would awaken alongside his evil god's divine power were extremely high. Moreover, the Phoenix Spirit itself had said that the chance that he might be able to reawaken his evil god divine power was over 20%. However, not only did Xianxia not look gladdened by the news in the slightest, his face was so void of emotion that it was scary. He asked, what would happen to my daughter if the evil god's divine aura was extracted from her profound veins? She would lose all the profound energy she has accumulated up to this point. Her profound veins would also return to mortal level. There's also the chance that she might suffer an unpredictable amount of damage from the operation or even be crippled, am I right? Xianxia replied coldly. That's right, the Phoenix Spirit said before narrowing its scarlet eyes. I can tell from your heart and soul that you don't wish to see this happen, but I still must remind you that you don't have much time left to hesitate or choose. Your daughter is currently 11 years old, and her profound veins haven't fully matured yet. Once she reaches 16 years of age, the evil god's divine aura will merge with her fully matured profound veins. By then it'd be too late to extract the evil god's divine aura from her. And then what? The temperature in Xianxia's eyes went down by several degrees, but then he remembered that the being before him was a benefactor that he might not be able to repay for life, and that all it was doing right now was informing him of a possibility. His eyes immediately returned back to normal before he gave the Phoenix Spirit a smile. Excuse me. I wasn't expecting the Phoenix God, the one who has inherited the will of the true gods, to crack a joke with me. Phoenix Spirit, there is no way I could exchange my daughter's future for a shot at recovery. No father would be able to do this. As he was saying this, Xing Jukong's figure suddenly flashed across his mind and caused his eyebrows to sink a couple of centimeters downward. Barring a certain animal who has lost all his humanity, that is. Even if the method had a guaranteed chance of success, even if it turned out that his powers would be multiplied 10 times or even 100 of times over, he still would not be moved no matter what. It was a choice he would never make. I've never thought myself to be a good person, but I'm no animal who is lower than even a pig or a dog either. Xianxia's mortal eyes suddenly flashed with extraordinary chilliness. I owe Wuxin 11 years of parenthood. I wasn't even by her side when she was born. Now that I've finally regained my daughter, I would exterminate anyone who dared to hurt her down to the last man. Xianxia expelled his murky feelings in a breath before turning halfway towards the exit. Regardless, I must thank you for informing of this method. I must also thank you for protecting my wife and daughter for 12 years straight with the Phoenix Barrier. I doubt I'll be able to repay this debt even in my next life. You don't need to mind it so deeply. Back then, you saved every Phoenix descendant in this place and gave me a reason to free them from their bloodline curse. This is the good karma you rightly deserve. This is fine, too. Maybe it isn't all bad for you to return to mortality and peace. I've impressed upon you a Phoenix mark. This means that the Phoenix Barrier here will no longer bar your entry, and you may visit me anytime you wish. You may go. Xianxia nodded gratefully at the Phoenix Spirit before bidding it goodbye. Although the Phoenix Spirit had granted him the special privilege to pass through the Phoenix Barrier anytime he wished, Xianxia doubted that he would be able to make use of it without someone to protect him. After all, the Phoenix clan was situated at the center of the 10,000 Beast mountain range, and there were countless dangers lurking in its surroundings. The Phoenix's scarlet eyes didn't disappear immediately despite Xianxia's departure. A long sigh resounded inside the black space after a moment. It is just like him to make such a choice, no, it didn't even count as a choice to him. The memory from Flame God Realm's Phoenix Spirit, the crack that had appeared on the wall of primal chaos, that terrifying aura that frightened even a divine soul. If everything were to happen as predicted, had they truly lost their biggest hope before the battle had even begun? After Xianxia had walked out of the Phoenix's trial room, he discovered that Feng Beichuan, Feng Xian'er, Feng Xian'er, and over 200 Phoenix clansmen were waiting for him. It was because they knew that Xianxia was going to leave very soon. Feng Beichuan looked as relieved as Xianxia after learning that Xianxia had finally escaped the oblivion in his mind. He sighed. Fate is truly a wonderful thing. To think that the mother and daughter who have lived with us separately for 12 years would turn out to be your family. If we had known about this earlier." The old man shook his head. He wasn't quite sure how to describe his own feelings. Xianxia smiled at him before giving him a solemn bow. "Senior Feng, thank you very much for your care. I doubt I would have made it this far without all of you." Feng Beichuan shook his head. "Nonsense. What we did wasn't even worth a 10,000th of the favor you did us back then." As it turned out, karma did exist in this world after all. Not only was the kindness he sowed so many years ago reciprocated tenfold, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they had saved his life. "Big brother benefactor," Feng Xian'er walked forwards with her head slightly bowed before asking disappointedly and timidly, "Will we meet again?" Xianxia smiled. "Of course we will. In the future, I should be staying at Demon Imperial City of the illusory demon realm permanently, but I will also be visiting Blue Wind Nation frequently. Both you and Zar are already traveling the world anyway, so you may come find me anytime you wish." "Ria, really?" Feng Xian'er looked up at Xianxia in excitement. Her eyes actually looked a little misty. Feng Beichuan couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. The rest of the Phoenix clansmen were smiling meaningfully as well. "Oh right, there is one thing I'd like your help with right away, Xian'er," Xianxia said. "I wish to return to Blue Wind Imperial City first when I leave, but the journey from here to there is quite far and I don't have a profound arc. So can you please escort us there?" Feng Xian'er looked like she had just heard the word of the heavens. She nodded immediately and said, I will protect Big Bro Benefactor with all my might, and... She was so excited she couldn't even speak coherently. In that case allow me to accompany you as well," Feng Xian'er hurriedly said. "There has been a lot of profound beast attacks at Blue Wind Nation as of late, and it'll be safer if we can both escort you." Cough, but Feng Beichuan immediately slapped Feng Xian'er back to his place and said, "Xian'er's cultivation is just a hair away from yours, so she alone is enough to protect our benefactor. However, you should stay at home and focus on your cultivation. You're the young clan chief, but Xian'er has almost surpassed you. Don't you find that embarrassing?" "Huh." Feng Xian'er wore a dumb look on his face. Big brother benefactor's safety was their first priority, so wouldn't it be better if they both escorted him back to Blue Wind Nation? How did his cultivation come into question all of a sudden? "Xianxia, it is wonderful to hear that you've walked out of your shadow, so I shan't keep you here any longer. Whenever you find the time, feel free to visit us anytime you wish," Feng Beichuan said sincerely. "I will," Xianxia nodded. "Xian'er, you'll be escorting them back home, okay?" Feng Beichuan instructed before lowering his voice slightly. You haven't been to Blue Wind Nation for a long while, have you? In that case, you don't need to hurry back home. It's fine if you stay there and have fun for a little while." "Yes," Feng Xian'er answered in a small voice. "Ah," Feng Xian'er piped up excitedly when he heard their conversation. "Father, I haven't been to the Imperial City for a long time too, can I?" "Stay quiet, you." Feng Beichuan pushed him back down a second time. "You will stay at home and focus on your cultivation. You're not allowed to go anywhere until you achieved a breakthrough." Feng Xian'er, Big brother benefactor. Feng Xian'er arrived next to Xianxia before she held his arm softly. She had done the same thing countless times for the past month or so, but right now the gesture was filled with sorrow. "I'll take you to your destination right away." It was at this moment that the ceiling formation of the trial rooms suddenly flashed red. A moment later, an identical red light shone on Feng Xian'er. Everyone turned to stare at Feng Xian'er immediately after that. The girl herself was surprised as she murmured somewhat absent-mindedly, "Lord Phoenix God is summoning me." The summons of the Phoenix God was something that almost never happened in the clan's recognition, so the rare event had excited every Phoenix clansman within the vicinity. Feng Beichuan urged her, "Quickly, go meet the Phoenix God." "Be on your way," Xianxia said. "I'll wait for you outside." Feng Xian'er nodded and released Xianxia, then she hurried her way into the trial room. Xian'er greets Lord Phoenix God. Inside the Phoenix's trial room, Feng Xian'er stared at the Phoenix's divine pupils before kneeling on the floor. Her heart was filled with anxiety and trepidation. Although this wasn't the first time she had met the Phoenix spirit, she had never been summoned personally before until now. "Xian'er," the Phoenix's voice resounded beside her ears and deep inside her soul. "I've been watching your growth for the past few years. You and Zar are undoubtedly the brightest hope and pride of this declined Phoenix clan." "Thank you for your praise, Lord Phoenix God," Feng Xian'er said anxiously. "I've summoned you today because I wish to make a request to you. It was a simple line, but it had caused Feng Xian'er to look up in shock. Even the color in her face had drained away. The Phoenix god wasn't making an order or an instruction. It was making a request. Phoenix god, but Xian'er cannot possibly bear a request from you. Feng Xian'er bowed down deeply before the Phoenix soul in panic. Yes, you can, the Phoenix soul said. The light in its pupils was growing weaker year by year, just like its voice was growing heavier and heavier. My wish for you is to leave this place and stay by Yun-Chi's side for as long as you can. Ah! Feng Xian'er was surprised at first, but then she recalled the Phoenix soul's so-called request and panicked even more. He's a great benefactor of Xian'er. Xian'er cannot harm him no matter what. This noble one is definitely not asking you to do him harm, much less conspire against him. Then, are you asking Xian'er to protect him, Lord Phoenix God? She relaxed slightly when she heard its assurance. The Phoenix soul said, he does not need your protection, for he's close with all the strongest profound practitioners on this continent. However, there's one thing that only you can do. Only me. Feng Xian'er repeated the word softly while feeling lost. You will do well to remember everything this noble one says starting now. You are not allowed to forget an even single word because it concerns Yun-Chi's life, fate, and even the life and death of this continent itself. Feng Xian'er stared towards the front while feeling confused. The world beyond the Phoenix barrier was the outside world to Yun Wuxin. It was a world she had never set foot on until now. Feng Xian'er carried Yun-Chi, while Yun Wuxin carried Chu Yuechen. Up in the sky where the horizon had no limit, and the air was completely different. Yun Wuxin looked as excited as a bird who had just exited her cage as she took in her surroundings and gulped down the different air greedily. We've finally left. Chu Yuechen stared into the distance with complicated eyes. To another person, a life without desire at frozen Cloud Asgard or years of isolation in the Phoenix clan might have felt like a prison, but Chu Yuechen had gotten used to it since a long time ago. In fact, she was very afraid of what the future might have in store for them. Ultimately, Yun Wuxin was the biggest reason why she had decided to leave with Yun-Chi. Little fairy, Chu Yuechen couldn't hide her thoughts from Yun-Chi. He said softly, I'll always be with you. Suddenly, a dangerous presence approached them from the distance. It was a giant eagle that was covered in green from head to toe. It had started a windstorm while it was flying in the sky, and the target of the windstorm was none other than them. Feng Xian'er tensed up and moved in front of Yun-Chi right away. Unlike her, Yun-Chi didn't look worried in the slightest. Yun Wuxin looked over and pointed a finger at the giant eagle. The windstorm the giant eagle had created was instantly dispelled, and it was locked in mid-dive by a power that it couldn't possibly resist even if it was 10 times stronger. Yun Wuxin examined the eagle very seriously before asking, What's that? It's so pretty, but it's also very vicious. Yun-Chi smiled. That's the fierce storm hawk. A long time ago, I fell here because it was chasing after me. Yun Wuxin's lips parted a little when she heard this. Then she said somewhat angrily, It chased after you before, Daddy? It must be a bad bird. She pointed a finger at the fierce storm hawk again, and the poor thing started spiraling downwards like a top until it flew out of Yun-Chi's vision. Ha 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 ha, Yun-Chi let out an unrestrained laugh but frowned afterwards. First, it was the blue scale beast. Now it was the fierce storm hawk. For whatever reason, they had changed so violently and were so different from what he remembered that it was almost as if they were distorted by something. Wait a second, distorted. If there was one thing Yun-Chi knew could distort a living being's nature, it could only be darkness profound energy. However, this was the profound sky continent, and no one besides him possessed darkness profound energy after Fen Juchen and Xunyu Wenchen were gone. Moreover, the moon's slaughtered devil nest near the Supreme Ocean Palace was in constant lockdown, so no demonic energy should have leaked into its surroundings. Even if it wasn't sealed, this place was still too far away to succumb to its influence. While Yun-Chi was thinking to himself, a red flash suddenly caught his attention. He subconsciously looked towards the east and was immediately greeted by the sight of a bright scarlet star. Right now it was daytime, and the blazing white sunlight shining in the sky should have been more than enough to cover up any star or moon. However, the scarlet star remained visible to the naked eye, and its light seemed sharp enough to pierce anything. When Yun-Chi stared at the star directly, he felt like a pair of scarlet needles had pierced through his eyeballs. Even his heart and soul were writhing in indescribable pain. That's... Mom, look, that red star has shown up again. Yun-Chi was still wrestling with his bewilderment when Yun Wuxin's soft cry reached his ears. Then, the red star suddenly vanished into nothing and stayed that way for a very long time. "Red star," did she say again. "What's up with that red light? Does it appear frequently?" Xianxia turned around and asked. Feng Xian'er answered him, "That's what we call the scarlet star. It started showing up half a year ago, but it almost never hangs around for long before it vanishes again. However, its true identity remains unknown even to this day, although there are a lot of rumors that claim that it is a sign of good fortune." Xianxia. "Actually, it isn't just showing up at the profound sky continent. Big Brother and I once saw it while we were exploring the illusory demon realm." Feng Xiang added before muttering to herself, "It seems to be showing up more and more frequently lately." "Half a year ago," Xianxia frowned before asking suddenly, "Isn't that about the time the profound beast started growing restless?" "Ah." Feng Xian'er was caught off guard. "I think so, yes. Are the two of them connected somehow?" Xianxia fell silent for a moment before he smiled at her and said, "It's just a harmless guess. Anyway, let's go." "Oh right, why did the Phoenix god summon you, Xian'er?" Xianxia asked without thinking. "About that?" Feng Xian'er bowed her head slightly before replying softly, "I don't want to hide this from you, but Lord Phoenix God told me not to tell anyone about it, so I'm sorry." Xianxia hurriedly waved his hands and said, "It's okay, it's okay. The Phoenix God must have summoned you for something important. It's my fault for asking about it without thinking." Feng Xian'er opened her mouth as if she was about to speak, but she ultimately decided not to. The 10,000 Beasts mountain range was home to many profound beasts, and most of them had turned violent for some reason. They had immediately attacked the group the moment they were within sight. They had been attacked 12 times in total by the time they finally made it out of the mountain range. Fortunately, most of the profound beasts living in this place were at the spirit profound realm or earth profound realm. Anything above that, such as sky profound beasts, were extremely rare. Considering the caliber of Feng Xian'er and Yun Wuxin, it was impossible for these mindless profound beasts to threaten them no matter how many there were. When the group had finally left the 10,000 beast mountain range, Xianxia finally realized that the territorial profound beasts had largely left their own territories for some reason. Not only were the villages situated next to the mountain range destroyed, even the official roads were unusually empty. He couldn't find a single person even though it was broad daylight. "Is it the same at other places?" Xianxia asked. Feng Xian'er nodded. The worst affected area was the wasteland of death. The disaster zone spans hundreds of kilometers in diameter, and no one dares to get close to it these days. Although the agitated beasts have been suppressed multiple times already, it was rumored that the unrest has only been growing day after day. If this situation continues, it is likely that every profound beast in the wasteland of death will turn violent as well. If this was true, then the only viable solution to quell this unrest might be to slaughter every profound beast that exists in the wasteland of death. The wasteland of death was 400 kilometers wide. It was the most dangerous place in Blue Wind Nation, where countless dangerous profound beasts lived. The profound beasts of the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range had nothing on them. A long time ago, Chu Yuechen had nearly died to 2 flood dragons in that place. If the Divine Phoenix sect hadn't been lending their aid to Blue Wind Nation, this unrest would have eventually led to a great catastrophe. What on earth is going on? While Xianxia was explaining the culture and people of Blue Wind Nation and Blue Wind Imperial City to Yun Wuxin, they suddenly heard the roars of several profound beasts and the sound of something cutting through the air so quickly that they were almost overlapping right ahead of them. Xianxia easily figured out that it was the sound of sword blasts tearing through space. Feng Xian'er came to a stop and explained to Xianxia, "It's that Ling Jai we ran into the day before yesterday." Ling Jai. Chu Yuechen shot him a sideway glance. The second young master of Heavenly Sword Villa. Back in those days, Ling Jai had fought Xianxia during Blue Wind ranking tournament. He had proven himself to be more talented than his older brother, Ling Yun in the sword, when he was just 16 years old, stunning everyone. "It is him," Xianxia replied. "He has been roaming the world for the past few years to improve his cultivation and help me find you. He wishes to atone for his mother's sins." Chu Yuechen. "I owe him several favors myself. When I went to fight the Burning Heaven clan, he had worried over my safety and traveled a long way just to aid me in battle when his grandfather, Ling Tianyi, tried to kill me. He risked his own life by standing in his way. And when I had traveled to Divine Phoenix Nation to participate in the 7-nation ranking tournament, He once again made a long trip just to cheer me on at risk of his own safety. Objectively speaking, they really can't be considered big favors, but they are still incredibly precious and pure to me. Xianxia let out a soft sigh before continuing with complicated feelings. He was why I ultimately decided against killing Xunyuan Yufeng despite learning of her atrocities. Should we avoid him? Feng Xian'er asked. It was clear that Xianxia hadn't been willing to see him the other day. No, it's fine. Xianxia smiled. It's rare to meet up like this. We can't just leave without greeting him. Lingjai obviously wasn't here to cultivate since his current level far outmatched the creatures of this place. The real reason he had lingered around this area for the past couple of days was to save those people who had strayed into this area by accident, just like how he had appeared like thunder when Feng Xian'er and Xianxia were attacked by the blue-scale beasts that day. Crack, a glaring sword blast tore black marks across space itself, and clumps of rampaging profound beasts fell to the ground in pieces just like that. When the final profound beast had let out its death throw, Xianxia abruptly entered his vision. Lingjai's entire body froze as if he had fallen into a trance. Long time no see, little Jai. Your looks haven't changed since we last met, though. Xianxia smiled at him as Feng Xian'er carried him to the ground. Lingjai remained absent-minded for several breaths before he finally stuttered out in disbelief. Yun, ah no, you're really. It's only been 5 years since we last met, right? Have you forgotten about me already? His reaction had amused Xianxia. And no. Lingjai hastily shook his head. Finally believing that his own eyes weren't playing tricks on him, Lingjai made his way towards Xianxia in unspeakable excitement. Boss, it's really you. I heard that you'd gone to a higher plane, and have you just returned from another world? But you look. Naturally, Lingjai couldn't sense any profound aura from Xianxia at all. Although this could be explained away as the gap between him and Xianxia being so wide that the latter's aura was impossible to perceive. It wouldn't explain why Xianxia's skin looked as rough as it did, or his unusually murky pupils. Amen, Xianxia nodded. I have gone to another world. In fact, I've just returned from there not too long ago. As for my current appearance, well, as you can see, I've lost all of my profound energy, and I'm basically a cripple from here on. Shocked, Lingjai couldn't find it in himself to believe Xianxia's words, much less accept them. He murmured, How can that? Lingjai's gaze strayed sideways unconsciously as he spoke, and Chu Yuechen abruptly entered his vision. In that moment, the celestial yang sword fell out of his grasp, and he shuddered like he had just been struck by lightning. The sword that had never left his hands hit the rocky ground with a crisp clank. Fairy, Yuechen. Once again, he had become frozen on the spot. In fact, the turmoil in his eyes seemed to be bigger than when he had seen Xianxia just now. Chu Yuechen was once the #1 beauty in Blue Wind Nation. His father had obsessed over her like a madman, and his mother had been so jealous that it had driven her to madness. She was also the woman he had hoped even in his dreams to find all these years. Amen, Xianxia smiled. I've finally found her. Bang! Lingjai's knees crashed heavily on the ground and the tears in his eyes spilled out like a broken dam. Fairy Yuechen, the sinner's son, Lingjai, is here to apologize on his mother's behalf. Lingjai slammed his head to the ground right after he said this. Since he hadn't protected his forehead with profound energy, blood spilled on the dusty ground the second the two made contact.